A little girl had been going hungry on the streets for 2.5 days. When she spotted a man lying in an alley covered in blood, he looked like he was on the verge of death, and she happened to be desperately short on money. The girl began rummaging through his pockets. The man suddenly opened his eyes. He grabbed the girl's wrist. Only then did she notice his crimson eyes and silver blue hair. The girl's heart seized. His icy voice rang in her ears. Just kill her! Could the man before her be Duke Valencia, the one who would one day end her life? Not long ago, the girl had stumbled upon a book. It told of a holy maiden, beloved by the gods, who would save all lives when the world stood on the brink of destruction. But the girl who should have been cherished by all had vanished without a trace at just 2.5 years old. Then, years later, two identical girls appeared. The only difference was the color of their eyes, one yellow, one blue. But everything else was exactly the same, even down to their name. And Cordelia, an orphan girl, was made to serve as the holy maiden's stand-in. The two were thrown into a sea of fire. Through it all, the holy maiden remained hopeful and spirited. She held Cordelia's hand, fully certain that someone would come and save them. But Cordelia could only watch helplessly as the holy maiden was carried away. And in that moment, she understood. It had all been nothing but a cruel farce. They hadn't come to save them, they had come to save him. After barely surviving the inferno, she was captured and used as bait. Her captor was none other than one of the four great noble houses, the House of Duke Valencia. In his bid to seize absolute power, he had planned to abduct the holy maiden Cordelia that very day. But at that moment, he realized he had taken the wrong person. The man brushed it off with a single, careless word. Kill her, then. And so, the girl who had spent her entire life as the holy maiden's shadow came to the end of her days, filled with bitterness and regret. When the girl, a street beggar herself, learned of this ending, it hit her like a bolt from a clear sky. She had put on a coat she'd found in a rubbish heap, to hide what she carried beneath it. She had to escape the fate written in that book. Before the holy maiden stepped outside, she had to get out. But just then, a heavy-set woman came charging in, seething with fury. You lazy pig. I know you're just pretending to be sick. But the girl was no pushover. She had escaped the orphanage once before. She could certainly do it again. I'm standing right in front of you. Your belly must be blocking your view. That's why you can't see me. The comeback left the woman utterly speechless. They would withhold her meals, all while their mouths overflowed with honey-sweet words. Hearing that, the girl finally reached her limit. She gave the woman a solid kick to her generous backside, not giving her a moment to react. She sprinted for the door, pulling faces all the way out. She stepped out onto the quiet street. She looked down at the flowers she'd casually plucked from a park. Who would ever buy these? They were just an excuse to make my life difficult. But none of that mattered anymore. She had no intention of going back. She couldn't afford to be thrown into another sea of fire. She refused to spend her life being sneered at and called worthless. For the sake of survival, she had to get away. But just then, the scent of blood reached her. When she leaned forward to look, the scene at the very beginning unfolded. The man had no idea how terrified of him the girl was. Perhaps from loss of blood, he was barely lucid. He drew the girl into his arms. Rosalind, why didn't you choose me? You can make me kneel before you. Make me bark like a dog. I'll do anything you ask. So please don't love him, love me instead. As he spoke, the man's voice grew fainter with each word, until he fell silent altogether. With great effort, the girl pushed him off her and fished out his coin purse. She was overjoyed. No more worrying about going hungry. She hummed a little tune. She was about to walk away, but then she glanced back at the man. Even a girl who was not known for kindness found herself moved by sympathy. If I help him a little, would he reward me for it? She didn't think too deeply about it. All she wanted was to survive. Duke Valencia might not be a good man, but surely he still had some measure of human decency. With that thought in mind, the girl mustered every last ounce of her strength and dragged him to an abandoned building nearby. The drag marks on the ground told her he had been hauled a good distance, and still he didn't wake. She had been pricked with needles, beaten black and blue, and gone so hungry she'd wanted to bite into her own flesh, but she had no idea how to treat a wound like this. Then she remembered the coat she had picked from the rubbish. She pressed it against the man's wound. Looking at her handiwork, she prayed that he would at least give her some kind of reward, that someday in the future he might take pity on her and spare her life. She turned the coin purse over in her hands. This at least could save her right now. But just then, something around the man's neck caught her eye. A glittering necklace. That might be worth something too. But when she opened it, she found a lock of red hair inside. Thinking it was something precious to him, the girl put it back where she found it. Before long, a wave of drowsiness washed over her. Her fever had likely not fully broken. When she opened her eyes again, the sun was already low in the sky. Still groggy, she was just about to get up when the man's voice came from behind her. "Who are you?" The girl jolted with a start. She stammered that she was the one who had saved him, but the man asked if she was Rosalind's daughter. The girl was caught off guard. "Then, are you Cordelia?" Hearing that familiar name, the girl denied it, cold sweat rising on her cheeks. She insisted she had never heard that name before. Looking at the girl before him, the man gently lifted her chin. "Your eyes look just like Rosalind's." Only then did the girl realize who he was talking about. She was the Holy Maiden's mother, and also Duke Valencia's first love. According to the book, Rosalind was a fallen noblewoman who obtained divine power later in life and married the second son of the Orissa family. But when the Holy Maiden was 2.5, Rosalind was killed in an attack, and the child vanished without a trace. Duke Valencia had been ambushed and knocked unconscious while searching for the child. The Holy Maiden had stumbled upon him and used her divine power to heal him, and the moment he laid eyes on her, he recognized her as Rosalind's daughter. But this girl was not the Holy Maiden. She loathed anyone who spoke that name. She shoved the man's hand away and insisted heatedly that she was not who he thought she was. Watching the girl's agitated reaction, the man immediately sensed she knew something. Just as she was about to fire back at him, a sound came from outside the door, just for a brief moment. The girl grabbed the man's hand and hurried to pull him behind a crate. She clamped a hand over his mouth to keep him silent. She recognized the voices. Those were the hired thugs sent by the fat woman. Not a single child who had fallen into their hands had ever made it out alive. The more she thought about it, the more terror seized her. The small hand over the man's mouth tightened its grip, until the man was on the verge of suffocating. Only then did she let go. It was then that the man noticed the bruises covering the girl's arm, and the countless needle marks across it. His expression darkened, but the girl hadn't noticed his reaction. She was trembling, arms wrapped tightly around herself, because the thugs had found the bundle she'd left outside. She didn't want to be dragged back and beaten to death like the other children. Her whole body shook without stopping. Just then, a hand gently came to rest on the top of her head and pressed down firmly. "Close your eyes, cover your ears, stay right here." At the man's quiet, steady words, the girl did exactly as she was told. She shut her eyes and pressed her hands hard over her ears. The thugs were startled by the man's sudden appearance, but seeing him drenched in blood, they assumed he was moments away from drawing his last breath. The girl sat with her hands pressed over her ears, while outside the smell of blood grew thicker, until the sounds finally went quiet. Then a tall shadow fell over her, and a hand gently came to rest on her head. Only then did the girl open her eyes. She looked up at the Duke. The man sat down and asked the question that had been weighing on him. "Why did you leave the orphanage? Did you run away from there?" But the question stirred up painful memories in the girl. "Ever since I can remember, the orphanage has been bleeding me dry. It wasn't until the day they rushed to move that I finally managed to escape that place." But if she told the truth, she would surely be mistaken for the Holy Maiden. Yet the man kept insisting she was Rosalind's daughter, destined to become the Holy Maiden. The girl seethed with anger. But when the man asked for her age, the girl let it slip. "I'm already 8 years old. That's what they told me at the orphanage." The girl quickly covered her mouth. She couldn't believe how foolish she'd been. But just then the man spoke. "Come with me, I'll take you in as my daughter." For the first time in 2.5 years, the Duke walked through his front door holding a little girl. The butler could only point at her in stunned disbelief. The man shot him a sharp warning to watch himself. He then entrusted the girl to the maid Emma, and turned to leave. But the girl gripped his sleeve tightly. She was frightened. "I need to file the adoption paperwork. That's what will make you officially my daughter. So stay here tonight. Don't even think about running away." The girl fell silent at his words. She knew perfectly well she wasn't the person this man was searching for. How long would she be allowed to stay here? And would the man actually keep the promise he'd made? She had no way of knowing. Not long before, after the man said he would take her in as his daughter, the girl suspected it was all just talk, that the moment the real Holy Maiden appeared, she would be cast aside. Why not just be honest and say you need a girl who can impersonate the Holy Maiden? To her surprise, the man admitted to it quite openly and asked if she was willing to go along with that. Though the girl hated having needle marks all over her arms, and hated being beaten and going hungry, what she hated most of all was being someone else's stand-in. Unable to hold back, she burst into tears. But just then, the man handed her her rag doll. It was just a tattered scrap of cloth she'd found in a rubbish heap, but it had been her only companion since childhood. "If you come with me, I'll give you a prettier doll and clean clothes, and you'll sleep in the largest room in the house." Hearing that, the girl's heart stirred. She knew the man only wanted her because he'd mistaken her for the Holy Maiden. But surely being a little trouble for a few days couldn't hurt. But what if I turn out not to be Rosalind's daughter? Or the Holy Maiden? What would you do with me then? Would you kill me? The man fell silent. He looked at the girl, her expression firm and resolute, yet her body trembling in fright. He didn't know what she had been through before this, but he trusted his instincts. And even if he later discovered he had been mistaken, he would not abandon her. I swear on the honor of House Valencia, I will never have you killed. His words were too sincere. She desperately needed somewhere she could survive. Just as she reached out her small hand, she said she had no name. She would let him know once she'd thought of one. But the man pulled his hand back. That's a problem. Filing official adoption papers requires a name. The girl panicked. Does that mean I can't be adopted right now? When the man told her she simply needed to pick a name, the girl made it very clear she despised the name Cordelia. Then you won't be called Cordelia. As he spoke, he gently covered the girl's eyes, then lifted her into his arms. How does Rosalia sound to you? The girl was overjoyed. She loved the name. But in the very next moment, a cascade of gleaming gold coins tumbled from her clothes. The Duke watched the scene, thoroughly baffled. Meanwhile, the girl was wondering whether to try and run. The man, who had already put it all together, said nothing. He simply said calmly, "No matter the circumstances, members of House Valencia do not bow their heads easily. As a member of this house, you would do well to remember that." And just like that, Rosalia was brought home by the man. On the way to be washed and dressed as Emma guided her, they learned the girl's name was Rosalia, and that she was only 8 years old. The butler immediately formed a conclusion. This must be the child the Duke had with his first love. I think something has gone wrong in his head. He's clearly lost his mind. When Rosalia, freshly washed, was dressed in an oversized nightgown, a dessert was set before her. Emma, worried the girl hadn't eaten in a week, had prepared something easy to digest. But Rosalia bowed her head and refused to eat. Because the woman at the old place had once told her, children like her had to look pitiful if they wanted to earn money. They could only eat what others left behind. If she ate proper food, she would lose people's sympathy. And without sympathy, there would be nothing to eat. Emma was stunned that such words could come from the mouth of a little girl. She knelt down and spoke to Rosalia gently. From this day forward, young miss, I will prepare something delicious for you every single day. You are a person. You deserve to eat what people eat. As an adult, I cannot allow a child to carry the burden of providing for herself. So from now on, never worry about earning money. Just eat well, sleep well, and grow up without a care. It was the first time anyone had ever said such things to Rosalia. Something stirred strangely inside her. After she finished eating, dragging the hem of a nightgown that trailed far behind her, Emma sighed quietly. I should have kept young Lady Ingrid's childhood clothes. At least then young Master Urian would have had something to remember his mother by. That made Rosalia curious. She knew Ingrid was the Duke's older sister, but she had no idea who Urian was. He is Lady Ingrid's son. He is currently recovering at our castle. Should you cross paths, please don't be frightened. Because young Master Urian has been afflicted with a terrible curse. Rosalia thought back to the book she had read. Before the Emperor married Ingrid, he had already loved another woman and fathered a son with her. So when Ingrid passed away, the Emperor immediately made that woman his empress. Unlike the Crown Prince, who was fond of the Holy Maiden, the second Prince Urian was utterly cold toward her, even after she helped break his curse. Rosalia figured they probably wouldn't run into each other anyway, and put the matter from her mind. She stepped into the lavish, magnificent room. Rosalia's mouth fell open in amazement. She'd never imagined a duke's bedroom could be this enormous. When she lay down on the bed, Emma gently placed a kiss on the girl's forehead. Rosalia didn't understand what it meant. Upon learning it was a spell to bring sweet dreams, she immediately hugged Emma tight. I want Emma to have sweet dreams too. In the stillness of the night, lying in the warm, spacious bed, Rosalia couldn't bring herself to sleep. Is it really all right for me to stay here? Meanwhile, back in the alley, passers-by had discovered the woman who had been exploiting orphans for money. Strangely, all the victims found were adults. The children were nowhere to be found. Rosalia knew nothing of this. When the morning light spread across the earth, the delighted girl was rolling around on her bed. Just as she was marveling at how comfortable it was, she suddenly froze. A head was hanging directly in front of her. A piercing shriek rang through the entire manor. The man turned around, only to find Rosalia sprinting toward him at full speed. She wrapped her arms tightly around his leg. In a stream of panicked words, the man pieced together what had happened. That is a horse's head, a warning fashioned from an animal. It is to remind us of our mission, to bring down the family that bears the white horse emblem and take their heads. The family the man spoke of, the one symbolized by the white horse, was the Orissa family. Only then did Rosalia grasp just how deep his hatred ran toward his first love for marrying into the Orissa family. But even that could not dull Rosalia's appetite. She sat in the man's lap, so blissfully content she felt like she was soaring through the clouds. This is what real bread tastes like. What I used to eat was barely dough. This is absolutely incredible. The man listened with a growing headache. It was time to find a tutor to teach Rosalia some manners. But Rosalia had a worry of her own. She didn't know how to earn money. Was that going to be a problem? The man simply picked up the fork beside him and handed it to Rosalia. Earning money is not your concern. Right now you should pick up your cutlery and eat properly. Seeing Rosalia's hesitant expression, a wave of anger rose inside the man. Simon, tell Yashi to take care of all those pests from yesterday. Rosalia had no idea what the man meant by pests. After the meal, Emma asked the girl what style she would like for her bedroom. Without a moment's hesitation, Rosalia said she wanted everything in gold, because that way she could play pretend princess. When the dead of night came, Rosalia, who should have been sleeping, sat up. Though she had been lucky enough not to cross paths with the holy maiden Cordelia so far, that encounter was only a matter of time. Since she had no way of knowing when the holy maiden would appear, she had to gather something of value before that day came. But then she recalled what the man had said to her. Rosalia hesitated. Yet for the sake of surviving, she saw no other way. After slipping the valuables from the room under her bed, Rosalia headed outside to explore. The night was pitch black. The little girl walked alone through the silent garden. Just as she was getting frightened and thinking of turning back, a sharp, overpowering scent of blood hit her. Then she heard footsteps from behind her. When she turned around, she saw a golden-haired boy with crimson eyes, a sword held in one hand, its tip still dripping. The girl jolted with fright. What is going on? Who is that? I have to run. Her mind had already sprinted miles ahead, but her body hadn't moved. The boy's hand reached slowly toward Rosalia. He seized her wrist and pressed the blade against her throat. The boy's serene, almost smiling expression stood in sharp contrast to Rosalia's eyes, which had already begun to fill with tears. Such a gentle, beautiful face, the kind you'd want to hold in your arms. Yet at night he became a terrifying demon, one who showed no mercy even to a gentle little sister, and who was curious what sounds a frightened girl would make. Looking at the snake tattoo on the boy's body, which seemed to move on its own, Rosalia's fear instantly evaporated. She recognized who the boy before her was, Urian, the son of Ingrid. But then her train of thought was cut short by a low, gurgling sound. At this life-or-death moment, Rosalia's stomach had decided to make itself known. The mortification was enough to make her want to dig a hole and disappear. Then, unexpectedly, the boy's grip on the sword went slack, and it fell to the ground. Urian clutched at his clothing in agony. As Rosalia watched in stunned disbelief, he crumpled straight to the ground. Seeing this, the girl stood motionless. What am I supposed to do now? Should I call Emma? Just then, a voice calling her name came from the distance. It was the Duke. He had gone to check on her room, only to find her gone. He asked Rosalia, "What are you doing out here in the middle of the night? Are you hurt?" Rosalia had no idea how to answer. What was she supposed to say, that she'd snuck out to play in the mud? From now on, you are not to vanish without a word. Looking at the concern on the man's face, Rosalia felt both warm and a little sad. He only worries because he thinks I'm the holy maiden. That's the only reason he'd care if I disappeared. Afterwards, just as Rosalia was about to ask the Duke what to do about the boy on the ground, her stomach made its embarrassing sound again. She could have sunk into the floor. The man then brought Rosalia inside to eat something. She bit into the bread with quiet delight, savoring it as though she were eating a cloud. The man's eyes widened. Because Rosalind used to say the very same thing. Like mother, like daughter, it seems. Rosalia found that strange. That woman was not her mother. It was also then that the Duke confirmed the boy from the garden was indeed Urian. The snake tattoo on his body was proof enough, and the blood on his sword had only come from a chicken in the coop. To change the subject, the girl asked the Duke if he had found a tutor for her yet. She was told that any tutor he hired would need to have graduated second in their class from the academy, play at least 3 instruments, have fine arts credentials, and be fluent in no fewer than 2 foreign languages. Rosalia was left speechless, her jaw dropping wide enough to fit an egg. Does a person like that actually exist in this world? And why would someone like that bother teaching me? They'd be of far more value doing anything else. The ducal manor was vast, but the only people Rosalia had any contact with were the Duke, Emma, and Simon. She was looking forward to meeting a new face. While nestled in the man's arms, Rosalia hesitantly asked, wasn't he going to do that thing for her? You know, the good dream spell. The Duke tensed up. Only after realizing it was Emma who had done it did he let out a breath of relief. He gently pressed his lips to the top of the girl's head. Sweet dreams. The following morning, Rosalia was told that Urian had expressed a wish to apologize to her. He had especially invited her to his quarters within the estate. But the moment the smell of blood in the air reached her, when the maid pushed the door open, Rosalia hid behind Emma and refused to step inside. She peered in with wide, cautious eyes, looking at Urian, someone she had never expected to have any dealings with. She couldn't fathom that the boy sitting before her now was the same person who had tried to take her head just last night. He looks like an angel. The words slipped out before she could stop herself. Mortified, Rosalia quickly darted back behind Emma. But is he really the same lunatic from last night? Urian, hearing the girl's unexpected compliment, paused for a moment, then quietly thanked her. It was the first time he had ever been praised like that. He sat up from the bed and, despite Emma's anxious protests, insisted he was fine. "You are Rosalia?" Rosalia stopped hiding behind Emma. She patted her little chest and replied in her childish voice, "Mm-hmm, that's me. It's nice to meet you. I am Urian von Ortega. Just call me Urian." As he spoke, he gently took the girl's small hand and pressed his lips to it. Rosalia's cheeks flushed crimson. She had no idea what he had just done. She had never been schooled in the customs of the nobility. Emma, standing nearby, smiled and quietly moved toward the door. This startled Rosalia even more. She couldn't understand why Emma was leaving. Before she could say a word, the door had already clicked shut behind Emma. Only the two young ones remained in the room. "Forgive me, Emma tends to look after me in her own way. I don't mind it myself. But after what happened last night, you must not want to be alone with me, especially given the rumors that anyone near me will catch the curse." With that, he turned and headed to the door to call Emma back. But Rosalia called out to stop him. She grabbed hold of his arm. She pulled too hard, and Urian stumbled off balance. Rosalia's feet slipped at the same moment. She was about to fall. Fortunately, the boy reacted in time. When Rosalia nervously opened her eyes again, wondering why she hadn't hit the floor, she found herself resting against his chest. "Are you all right?" But the very next moment, Rosalia burst out, "Who said that? The curse isn't contagious. That's complete nonsense." What kind of brainless person came up with that? The words seemed ordinary enough, yet they touched something deep within the boy. He reached out to help her up. "You haven't been formally adopted yet, but we'll soon be cousins. From now on, I'll be more careful. I won't hurt you again. I hope you can believe that I mean you no harm. I only want us to get along." Rosalia refused to let him pull her up, too afraid he might let go halfway. It was only now that she realized she had not yet been formally adopted by the Duke. She had assumed all the paperwork was already settled. Her spirits sank a little, but then she heard the boy cough. Rosalia immediately rolled up her sleeve. "Do I have the snake mark now? Look, I don't, do I? If anyone ever tells you again that your curse is contagious, throw mud in their face." Having comforted Urian, she prepared to leave. But just before she did, a thought crossed her mind. She rose up on her tiptoes and planted a kiss on top of the boy's head. "I'm casting a sweet dreams spell on you. You've surely received plenty of those before, but I wanted to give you one too. I hope you get better soon." And with that, she left. Urian stood in a daze, watching the girl's retreating figure. He had heard about it some time ago, that a filthy little orphan had arrived at the Duke's estate, and she had silver hair, the very color the Duke detested. The Duke had ordered that no one except a select few was to approach her. The maids all whispered that she practiced dark witchcraft. But a sweet dreams spell, could that really be called witchcraft? He would simply observe her a while longer, to see whether she was a schemer trying to worm her way into the Valencia ducal family, or a wicked witch, or perhaps she was truly nothing more than an innocent child. Calamity always arrives without warning, and Rosalia's had already come. The little beggar girl who had gone hungry for 2.5 days had been taken in by the man. In gratitude for saving his life, he had adopted her as his daughter, yet out of an excess of devotion, he had confined her to the estate, allowing only certain approved individuals to see her each day. Rosalia was furious. She couldn't understand why he was forcing her to keep everyone at arm's length. She clenched her small fists, rose to her feet, and turned to leave. "I don't want any cookies anymore." She stormed off, leaving the man thoroughly bewildered. It was only the following year, when a young man came to visit Urian's room. Dark-haired and dark-eyed, he was none other than the heir to House Lampette's, Breika. Though everyone called the second prince a dull-witted, good-for-nothing royal, Breiki paid no mind to others' opinions. The two were close friends, and this visit was simply to catch up on gossip. "I heard you've been put under house arrest because of the girl the Duke adopted, and that you even wrote a personal letter to the Emperor, urging him to approve the Duke's adoption petition. Is that girl some kind of saint?" Urian, uncharacteristically, simply replied that she was family. And at the mere thought of Rosalia, a smile spread across the boy's face. This only made Breiki all the more curious about her. He bid his friend farewell and strolled out, stifling a yawn. Meanwhile, the girl had just finished a full day of lessons. Rosalia, whose backside had gone completely numb from sitting, was eager to step outside for a breath of fresh air. Emma was conflicted. The Duke had given her strict, repeated orders that Rosalia was not to cross paths with Brakey. But just for a little while. Surely that would be fine. With that thought, Emma agreed. She even prepared a batch of Rosalia's favorite butter cookies. This delighted the girl. "You're my absolute favorite person in the whole world, Emma." Rosalia stepped out into the grand garden and was admiring the scenery around her when she walked right into a tree without looking. A book promptly fell from the branches and landed squarely on her head. Rosalia was baffled. Since when do trees enjoy reading? She picked the book up off the ground, still thoroughly confused, when there was a sudden whoosh, and Brake appeared, one hand rubbing the back of his head. Then he noticed something unexpected. It was Rosalia, and he had landed directly on top of her. She immediately demanded he get off before she was crushed. But more than the fall itself, the sight of her cookies shattered across the ground sent Rosalia into complete despair. I hadn't even taken a single bite. Brakey was at a complete loss. He couldn't understand how a few broken cookies warranted such grief. As long as she didn't cry, he would buy her as many as she wanted. I'm not going to cry. You're Urian's friend who came to visit today, aren't you? Why are you here? Shouldn't you be in the guest quarters? When she noticed the boy absorbed in what appeared to be an advanced technical treatise, Rosalia found it impossibly dull. This surprised Brakey. This is written in an ancient language. How can you read it? Rosalia was stunned. I never studied any ancient language. What even is that? Yet when she looked at the text, the meaning simply came to her. Just then, Emma's voice calling for Rosalia drifted in from the distance. Hearing it, Rosalia turned to leave. Hush, don't make a sound. Are you Rosalia? After she nodded in confirmation, Brake looked at her properly for the first time. Faint smile appeared at the corner of his lips. He gently took the girl's small hand and pressed it against his own cheek. You are wonderful. I like you. I can't stand foolish, weepy girls, but you're not foolish and you don't cry easily. Faced with his sudden declaration, Rosalia was even more confused. She yanked her hand away. Stop saying such nonsensical things. Do you dislike me that much? Yes, very much so. For no particular reason. Hearing Emma's voice draw closer again, Rosalia hurried to leave. Just before going, she asked the boy for his name. My name is Brakey. At the sound of the name, Rosalia froze in shock. She recalled what had been written in the book, that she and the Saintess would be cast into a sea of fire, and that among those who came to save the Saintess was him. Puzzled by her strange reaction, Brakey asked if she knew him. Rosalia quickly shook her head. I've never heard that name before in my life. As Emma's voice drew steadily closer and Rosalia was about to call back, a mischievous hand suddenly clapped over her mouth. He dragged her into the bushes. Outraged at being manhandled, Rosalia was about to sink her teeth into Brake's hand. Don't you like butter cookies? I'll buy you some. Wasn't that what we agreed on just now? Brakey made it clear she could ask for anything she wanted, on the sole condition that she not tell anyone the two of them had met. After a full 2.5 minutes of deliberation, a slow smile crept across Rosalia's lips. She then found Emma and explained that she had been playing in the mud in the garden and hadn't heard her calling. Did you happen to run into anyone? Not at all. I didn't see a single soul. This put Emma at ease. She hurried Rosalia back inside. Rosalia, however, couldn't figure out why Emma was in such a rush. She soon let the thought go, reaching instead into her pocket to touch her little prize. She hadn't wanted anything too expensive. She had no wish to feel indebted, so she had chosen a modest trinket. But from the subtle look on Brakey's face, she could tell it was worth a fair few gold coins. The very next day, while she was having a meal with the Duke, Brakey sent over a generous delivery of cookies. The Duke was still puzzled when a delighted Rosalia accidentally let it slip, asking the servant how many Brakey had sent. The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. The Duke didn't need to guess. It was obvious the two had met. To change the subject, Rosalia quickly invited the Duke to share the cookies. She also suggested inviting Urian, but the Duke refused. Rosalia was puzzled. He prefers to be alone, and with the curse upon him, it is best he avoid contact with others. Hearing this, Rosalia grew angry and shot back that the curse was not contagious. How could you say something so hurtful? She demanded, her disappointment plain. Your family, don't you understand that? You're being a fool. The Duke remained unmoved. I need you to keep your distance from him as much as possible. Because of the curse, he may lose control, becoming erratic and unpredictable. His condition is very unstable. You were simply fortunate that night that you weren't hurt. Both your safety and Urian's matter deeply to me. Rosalia clenched her hands into fists. Then she turned and walked away. I don't want any cookies. She left the man staring after her in startled silence. Your Grace? The only people who can keep the young lady company are myself and young Master Urian. I believe she needs friends her own age. You should know. You cannot keep her hidden away forever. At 8 years old, she should be out in the world, seeing, hearing, and experiencing everything. She should meet all kinds of people and grow wiser. Sheltering her too fiercely will only harm her. She is the daughter your first love had with another man. Yet the man had taken her in as his own daughter. Her mother had possessed a sacred power, and the Duke's term of endearment for her. That was why the order had revered her as a saintess. If the girl had also inherited her mother's gift, the order would undoubtedly take her away for the good of all. And even if she were not the saintess, the Olarisa family would certainly not let her go. And indeed, that very day, the order's priests arrived at the Duke's estate, demanding to see the girl. The bald priest at the front greeted her with a wide, cheerful grin. Lady Cordelia, we are priests of the Arkasha order. We have come to take you home. Rosalia immediately declared that she was not Cordelia, and she was certainly not going anywhere with them. But when she glanced over at the Duke standing to the side, he said nothing. Her heart dropped, and panic swept through her in an instant. Are you sending me to the order? Why? Is it because I'm no longer of any use to you? Rosalia's heart ached. She could not understand why the man who had once sworn in the name of his house to protect her had changed. Didn't you say it would be all right? I can do the laundry, I can clean the house. I won't be picky about food anymore. If you need me to earn money, I'll do whatever you ask. Rosalia's tears fell without stopping. The book had said that all her misfortunes stemmed from her sharp tongue. The saintess had written of her faults in those pages as well, saying she should only speak when the two of them were alone. After all, wait, they were such good friends. Is it because of the way I speak? If so, I will be as quiet as a mute. So please, don't abandon me. Tears streamed down Rosalia's face. The man finally spoke. Have I not told you? The House of Valencia does not bow, not under any circumstances. As the man lifted her into his arms, Rosalia stopped crying, utterly bewildered, unable to understand why he had ignored her just moments ago. But between sobs, she corrected him. You didn't say bow, you said bend. The man then faced the bald priest, Rosalia still in his arms, and demanded answers. And what exactly do you have to say for yourself? As it turned out, not long before this, the bald priest had gone to the Duke and demanded he hand over Rosalia, claiming it was the will of the Holy Emperor, an imperial command. The Duke refused outright, insisting the girl was not Cordelia but Rosalia. He then ordered them to leave, but the bald man pressed on with a low, pointed tone. Are you not suppressing the child's voice? That is the Holy Emperor's concern. After all, certain households have been known to strip children of their right to speak, just as you are doing. The Duke recognized it as a provocation, yet he had no choice. He could not afford to bear such an accusation. The bald priest then instructed the Duke not to utter a single word during their meeting with the girl. Otherwise, the order would refuse to accept the outcome. Now that the restriction had been lifted, the Duke had no need to hold back any longer. He immediately ordered his men to throw them out and feed them to the chickens. Facing imminent disaster, the bald priest scrambled to invoke the names of the Holy Emperor and the Emperor. Just then, a bewildered Urian walked into the room, having heard the order had sent people and wanting to see what was happening. Seeing that the visitor was the second prince, the bald priest felt as though salvation had arrived. He dropped to his knees and slid before the boy, attempting to play on his emotions. He claimed they were merely following orders, and that the Duke was defying both the Holy Emperor and the Emperor himself. This way, he could save his own skin while tarnishing the Duke's reputation at the same time. In his mind, the second prince was easy to manipulate, and Urian did respond exactly as expected. The commands of those two are indeed not to be defied. Sensing his scheme was about to succeed, a faint smile crept across the bald priest's face. Urian's expression remained calm. He looked over at Rosalia, still held in the Duke's arms. A sense of defeat had made the girl lower her head. Her small hands clenched involuntarily. Is this my fate? To be taken to the order in the end? To meet the saintess and ultimately to die in her place? At that thought, Rosalia tightened her grip around the man's neck. She did not want to leave. However, honored priest, you know, even the most ruthless person cherishes their own family. Yet we have only just met today. So tell me, as her older brother, what do you think I should do? And her name is Rosalia. Do not take it upon yourself to change it, or I will be very displeased. She is a daughter of House Valencia. She is not someone the likes of you can speak to as you please. Cold sweat trickled down the bald priest's face. Was this truly the weak, dim-witted second prince from the rumors? He looked up and saw the smile on Urian's face. He couldn't understand how a boy who seemed so warm and gentle could carry such weight in his words. It seems our honored priests have finally accepted their punishment. Oh, Rosalia, would you like to say a word to them? With her confidence restored, Rosalia called out boldly, I am absolutely not going to the order, and don't ever come to my home again. She gave a loud, indignant harumph. Though no one knew exactly what punishment the priests received at the hands of the knights, life at the estate quickly returned to normal. Looking at the lavish spread on the table, Rosalia's expression turned gloomy. There are bell peppers in here. Wasn't it someone who said she'd stop being picky about food? With no choice, Rosalia reluctantly stuffed the pepper into her mouth. The Duke then told her that he had found the tutor she had requested, the one who could play 3 or more instruments and also had accomplishments in fine arts, as well as fluency in 2 or more foreign languages. He must be a remarkably talented and dashing teacher. But the next day, Rosalia was a little puzzled. She looked at the man standing before her. Simon, do you meet all the requirements the Duke described? In response to the girl's question, Simon declared with great pride that he met every single one. When Simon picked up his teaching rod and prepared to begin the lesson, he found himself curious about one thing. Why was Urian also present? I'm here to attend your class, of course. I have plenty to learn as well. Simon was at a loss for words, but started the lesson regardless. He began with the origins of House Valencia. The 4 great families of the empire were known as the pillars of the nation, and House Valencia was among them. When the world faced its end, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, emissaries of the dark, came forth. And so the divine sent the Holy Son and Holy Daughter, commanding them to save the world from the horsemen's grasp. They found the first emperor, gathered 4 great heroes, and together with the Holy Son and Holy Daughter, fought valiantly against the 4 horsemen, and achieved final victory. But the devastation of war had left the entire land in ruin. The emperor and the 4 heroes were afflicted with a curse that could not be undone. Even the Holy Son and Holy Daughter could not remove it. They could only seal the curse within the heroes' bodies. When the first emperor founded the empire, he granted each of the heroes the title of Duke. House Olorisa claimed the east, House Petros claimed the west, House Lampets claimed the south, and House Valencia claimed the north. Though the first emperor who had stopped the world's end lived out his life in peace, blessed by the Holy Son and Holy Daughter, his descendants and the heroes' bloodlines were a different matter. As they intermarried with common folk over the generations, cursed children were born from time to time. Young Master Urian was among those afflicted, cursed from birth. However, if one with sacred power could purify the curse, it could be dispelled, on the condition that Lady Rosalia is the saintess who holds the key. Out of an overwhelming love for his adopted daughter, the man had kept her confined. But after heeding the maid's counsel, he finally agreed to let the girl go out. Upon learning she was allowed outside, Rosalia couldn't stop smiling. It was the first time she had left the estate since arriving. Her face shone with pure joy. After experiencing the teleportation magic, she stepped out of the carriage and immediately felt ill. She told Simon to go on ahead in a daze, saying she would catch up shortly. After 2.5 hours of recovery, a somewhat recovered Rosalia made her way into the hall. Just then, her arrival caught the attention of a golden-haired girl. Which family does she belong to? I've never seen her before. The little blonde then called out to Rosalia and asked where her parents were. When Rosalia said she had no mother or father, the blonde was taken aback. Inwardly, she looked down her nose. Oh, so she's just a commoner. Rosalia paid her no mind. She wandered through the art exhibition looking for Simon, and then a certain painting caught her eye. The chaotic, tangled brushstrokes left her baffled. What on earth is this supposed to be? I feel like I could paint this myself. Rosalia hadn't realized she was muttering loud enough for the boy standing behind her to hear. He rounded on her sharply. The painting on that wall, he declared, was worth 250 gold coins. It was not something a little child like her could ever produce. With great pride, he explained that this was the dying masterpiece of an artist who had been painting even as he starved to death, brush never leaving his hand. Rosalia couldn't understand it. If the man died of starvation, what good does an expensive painting do him? What good? It earns money for our family, of course. After all, the artist was under our patronage until the very end. That is precisely why he became a renowned painter. I'm sure even in the grave, he is grateful. The boy's capitalist logic left Rosalia more bewildered than ever. Didn't his family deliberately let the painter starve to death? Just as the furious boy was about to lash out at Rosalia, the golden-haired girl appeared and whispered something in his ear. Who let you in here? She prodded Rosalia as she spoke. Did you really think that dressing up nicely would let you pass yourself off as a noble? Don't dream it. People of low birth, it shows at a glance. The boy had no idea that disaster was about to fall on him. He kept rambling on about the difference between himself and Rosalia. Then came a loud crack, as a painting came crashing down on his head. The one who had struck him was Rosalia. The air seemed to freeze. The boy stared at her in stunned disbelief. But Rosalia clearly had no intention of stopping. She raised the frame again, and struck again to the sound of splintering wood. "Someone help me!" The boy had lost his nerve. "Do you know who I am? How dare you treat me like this?" Rosalia remained utterly calm. "And who are you? Are you my father? I don't even know who I am myself. So how would I know who you are?" That pushed the boy over the edge. He raised his fist and swung at Rosalia. At that critical moment, a boy in a red cape stepped between the two of them. "You'd better stop now. You'll only embarrass yourself further." At the sight of who it was, the boy who had been raging a moment ago instantly deflated. Why is he here? Could he actually know that little wildcat? To think that a ducal house, which always boasted power rivaling the royal family, would have dealings with such a low-born girl? Rosalia, however, felt no gratitude for his intervention. "Who are you? What business is it of yours? Get out of my way." The red-haired boy, rather than taking offense, found her rather entertaining. "Do I look like I'm joking to you? What's wrong with you?" The redhead remained perfectly cheerful. "How delightful. My two hobbies are hunting and appreciating fine art." "What are you going on about? Stop babbling." The redhead just laughed heartily. "You just said it was their family that let the painter starve, didn't you?" As he spoke, he snatched the painting board right out of Rosalia's hands. "You're not wrong. This was bought at the cost of a human life. Best to burn it." The boy nearby moved to stop him, but it was already too late. The flaming frame hit the ground. The redhead walked toward Rosalia. "Do you know what hunting and appreciating art have in common? Both possess a certain brutal beauty." Though the fire nearby blazed fiercely, Rosalia didn't blink. She stared straight at the boy before her. Red hair, fire magic, green eyes. He was Edmund von Petros, of the Red Knight lineage. Once she recognized who he was, Rosalia hugged her own arms and began to tremble. Her face went pale. Edmund noticed that something seemed off about the girl. He called her name repeatedly, but the girl stared at the flames behind him, and the memories of the book she had read came flooding back. Her vision began to blur, and she lost consciousness. Replaced by a false saintess, the young girl had been left with no choice but to beg on the streets to survive. Then one day, by a twist of fate, the girl's life changed. She became the Duke's adopted daughter. The man firmly believed she was the daughter of his first love, for they shared the same eyes. At the time, Rosalia had believed she would grow up safely under the Duke's care, until she met a red-haired boy. When he used his fire magic, the girl fell into unconsciousness. In her dream, Rosalia felt the flames searing her body, stealing the breath from her lungs. "Don't worry, someone will come to save us." At those unexpected words, the girl opened her eyes. She stared in disbelief at the one who had spoken. The person looked exactly like Rosalia, except for their eyes. It was only then that Rosalia understood who this was. She was the saintess written about in the book, and now she was inside a dream. But if this is a dream, why does it hurt so much? She couldn't understand. Just then, Bright came charging through the flames. Rosalia's heart lifted. She thought he had come for her. But the next moment, Brakey rushed straight past her. Edmund, who had also arrived, ran toward the saintess as well. Rosalia's heart broke. She wanted them to take her with them too, but no one paid her any mind. They surrounded the saintess and left. The pain was so overwhelming that Rosalia couldn't even rise to her feet. She felt utterly powerless. As the fire closed in, the girl let out a scream. The flames had already taken her face. Rosalia knew this was a dream. She wanted desperately to wake up. "All of this is from the book I read." What was it called again? The book I read. When I read that book. What kind of person am I? The question had barely surfaced in Rosalia's mind when the pain vanished completely. She found herself in an unfamiliar place. A pristine hall with only her inside. Rosalia had no idea where she was. Just then, a small girl appeared not far from her. When Rosalia saw the girl's face clearly, she was shocked. The girl was herself. Something strange unfolded. The girl lifted her head. Rosalia's vision began to waver. "No one is coming to save you." Those words jolted Rosalia awake. She stared in disbelief at what she had just heard. The man's concerned voice brought her back to her senses. "Uncle, you can't kill me." The man froze. He recalled their first meeting. He had made a promise that he would not kill her. At that moment, the man had no idea what Rosalia had been through. Rosalia's small hand reached for the back of his. She did not want the man who cared for her to let go. Then she closed her eyes. The man panicked. He called out loudly for the doctor. Fortunately, Emma's gentle reassurance helped calm him down. "Look, she has simply fallen asleep." Gazing at the girl's peaceful, calm face, the man took her small hand in his. He gently kissed her forehead. Have sweet dreams this time. No one knew how much time had passed when Rosalia woke, blinking her eyes. She couldn't figure out how she had gotten home. She clearly remembered being at the art exhibition. Could it all have been a dream? First, I had an argument with the Duke, then at the exhibition I met a strange person. And then some mad redhead set fire to a painting. And then that strange dream. Rosalia shuddered. She felt her face to check whether it had been disfigured. She checked again and let out a breath of relief. But the room was completely empty. Had she been left here all alone? Emma appeared just then. She came to check on Rosalia, who was hiding under the covers like an ostrich, and made sure the girl was all right. She explained that Simon had brought her home after she fainted. Are you hungry? Would you like some butter bread? His Grace also asked that you stop by once you've eaten. Rosalia was frightened, afraid the Duke would scold her. After all, a commoner striking a noble was not something that could be easily overlooked. This time I may truly be abandoned for good. Deep in these thoughts, Rosalia found herself already at the Duke's chamber. But what she heard next left her completely stunned. I'm sorry. Everything you went through yesterday was the result of my failure of duty. I am prepared to accept any punishment. Even banishment from the city, I will not object. Though Simon had been surrounded by nobles the moment he entered the hall, he could in fact have gotten away. It was not because of them that he'd been unable to wait for Rosalia. The truth was, Simon simply had not wanted to wait for her. Rosalia had no idea about any of this. She simply assumed yesterday couldn't all be blamed on him. Though when Simon had first met Rosalia, he had taken a strong disliking to her, believing her to be of Olarisa blood. You're my teacher. If you leave, who will teach me? Does there have to be a punishment? The Duke rejected her suggestion. Rosalia was baffled. She had no idea how to punish someone. After 2.5 minutes of thought, the girl raised a small finger. She had an idea. Then your punishment is to eat nothing but bell peppers for an entire month. As for striking a young noble as a commoner, the Duke praised the girl for her courage. As a reward, the man took Rosalia out to buy her a gift. The girl happily munched on her cookies. After all, it was the first time she had gone out with the Duke. But the Duke looked at Rosalia with quiet concern. No matter how much he tried to nourish her, the girl looked thinner and more frail than other children her age. While Rosalia was chewing and not paying attention, she walked straight into a man. The Duke quickly took her small hand. My hands are all covered in breadcrumbs and butter. The man paid no mind and led her toward the doll shop. Just then, the doll shop owner roughly shoved a small beggar child aside, mouth full of cruel words. But the moment he spotted the Duke, his manner changed instantly. He then noticed Rosalia beside him and began fawning with flattery. But the girl watched the little beggar child shuffle away, and inexplicably thought of her former self. After the Duke bought Rosalia a beautiful doll, he prepared to take her home. But at that moment, Rosalia stopped. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, a girl who looked just like a princess, just like the doll in her hands. She thought to herself, when the true saintess appeared, she would have to leave the Duke. Would she still look like this then? She had no way of knowing. Just then, Rosalia looked toward the distance. Then, to the Duke's astonishment, she broke into a run. The little beggar child was curled up in an alley, a faint smile on her face. But the arrival at the alley's entrance startled her. It was Rosalia. Here, this is what you wanted just now, isn't it? But you'll have to give me your doll in return. A moment later, the Duke caught up. He was about to tell her that running off like that would get her lost. But then he saw the doll Rosalia was holding. I'm sorry, Uncle. I traded the doll you gave me for this one without asking. The man was silent for a long moment. As long as you're happy. Though Rosalia herself didn't quite know why she had wanted to trade dolls with the little girl, she simply felt that she had to do it. When they returned home and the bread on the table came into view, both the Duke and Urian looked oddly uncomfortable. Rosalia was confused. She couldn't understand why neither of them was eating. Urian was about to mention that the Duke didn't care for sweets, when the man picked one up and put it in his mouth. It seems your tastes have changed quite a bit. By the way, did you receive the Emperor's letter? The one regarding Rosalia's adoption? Yes, I did. I honestly didn't expect it. He had been so firmly opposed before, yet this time he agreed without hesitation. Urian was delighted. The Duke cast a sideways glance at his nephew. How did you convince him? Finishing the tea in his cup, Urian replied, I simply revised my medical orders, claiming I still needed to recuperate for a while longer, 3 years or so. It seems I really am his true son. I told him it was my final wish, and he approved it at once. Though Urian said it with a smile, the Duke knew it wasn't as simple as it sounded. For if Urian failed to die in 3 years as he had claimed, the Emperor would personally see to it that he did. Only then could the emperor's favored first prince inherit the throne without obstacle. You didn't have to do that. Rosalia had no idea about any of this. She simply didn't want Urian to be unwell and kept urging him to eat. With Rosalia's household registration now settled, the Duke prepared to make the announcement. He could no longer allow anyone to mock her as an orphan. But when he asked Rosalia about her birthday, she was baffled. I don't know. What's that? With no other option, the Duke declared the day of her registration to be her birthday. He would hold a birthday party and invite some guests. So, uncle, does that make you my father now? The words were right on the tip of her tongue, but Rosalia couldn't bring herself to say them. She shook her head. Uncle was uncle. The Duke, once again helpless, simply said she could call him whatever she liked. Just then, Rosalia remembered she still hadn't eaten the cookies Breaky had sent. Urian's lips curved into a quiet smile. If you leave them too long, they'll go stale. I'll make you something even better. As for those cookies, just throw them away. Rosalia choked at those words. That Urian just now seemed very serious, and yet he was smiling the whole time. In the 2 weeks that followed, the Duke's household worked without rest preparing for Rosalia's birthday party. Rosalia lay on her bed bored. The thought of Urian saying he wouldn't attend her birthday party made her sad. Even though he had been smiling at the time, he hadn't looked happy at all. Just then, a maid appeared before her, saying she would be filling in for the busy Emma for the time being. This puzzled the girl. She then said she wanted to go play in the courtyard. Though the maid's expression remained composed, she could not stop trembling. She had no idea when the young lady would show her true colors, and she had her reasons for thinking so. All because the Duke had said he simply found the girl rather nice and adopted her. And when she had come back from shopping with his grace, she was carrying a grimy doll picked up from the rubbish. The maids were convinced it was a cursed doll. Though Lady Emma says his grace adopted her out of genuine affection, this is all far too strange. I believe his grace must be under some sort of spell. Mia, you had better be careful. We must survive this. Adopted by a villainous duke, the maids were convinced the girl had cast a terrible curse upon the man. They swore to survive under her roof. The prerequisite: never let their guard down. Mia, could you bring me a bag for the cookies? Thank you, Mia is the best. Looking at the utterly innocent expression on Rosalia's face, Mia found her completely and utterly adorable. When Rosalia gave another maid a painting, she murmured that it would be worth a fortune in 10 years. I was going to keep it for myself, but in the end I wanted to give it to you. Dorothy's demeanor shifted entirely in that instant. She was completely won over by Rosalia's charm. Before anyone noticed, 2.5 days had passed, and the day of the birthday party arrived. Due to the matter with the order, the imperial family did not attend. House Valencia had also not extended invitations to the other 3 ducal families. In the grand and magnificently adorned banquet hall, the Duke escorted Rosalia down the steps. But she could hear the murmuring from the crowd below, whispering about how little she resembled the Duke. Rosalia panicked. She trembled from head to toe and couldn't find her voice. Just then, she noticed a hand raised high from below. It was Simon, reminding her to look at her own hand. Rosalia had anticipated her nerves and written her speech on her palm in advance. But the anxiety had been so great that sweat had smeared the writing beyond recognition. The girl swallowed hard. She began her opening address, stumbling over every word. First of all, for the presence of each and every one of you, I am most grateful. But after Rosalia finished, the room fell completely silent. Cold sweat trickled down Simon's back. This time it's truly over. Just then, the Duke was the first to begin clapping, breaking the silence. After a brief hesitation, the guests followed with their own applause. The Duke then led Rosalia down the stairs. Did I do something wrong? Seeing how worried the girl was, the Duke told her that tonight's party was entirely hers. She could do as she pleased. Hearing that it was all for her, Rosalia beamed with joy. As the somewhat restless girl wandered through the banquet hall, a voice came from behind her. Lady Valencia, my name is Sophia. Happy birthday. You're truly beautiful. You look every bit the born noble. Thank you, and so do you. Sophia had not expected Rosalia to say that, and was momentarily stunned. But then Sophia got to the point. Because of you, Daniel has been traumatized and has never recovered. Yet you seem to be doing wonderfully. Rosalia had no idea who Daniel even was. Daniel is my cousin, the young heir of the family that sponsored the art exhibition. His family has gone bankrupt. You were the one who struck Daniel, yet you face no punishment at all. Don't you find that deeply unfair? To Sophia's challenge, Rosalia felt no sense of injustice. After all, Daniel had openly declared that his family had let the painter starve and had openly humiliated her. You should understand, we are nobles, and they are merely commoners. Granting them so much as a meal to eat is already an act of great generosity. Weren't you a commoner yourself not long ago? No wonder you get upset when commoners are looked down on. You were one of them just recently. Just as Sophia was taunting her, a wild boar came crashing down behind Sophia. Terrified screams flooded the entire banquet hall. It's your birthday. Why are you standing here alone? The one who had arrived was Edmund. Rosalia was baffled. She had definitely heard Edmund was under house arrest. It turned out he had come to deliver a birthday gift for the girl, the wild boar beside him. It made one seriously question his judgment. You're just like a wild boar yourself. Only a wild boar could be this reckless. Still, Rosalia was thoroughly unamused by Edmund's arrival. She had no desire to see this red-haired troublemaker. Edmund then asked the girl if she had a dance partner. He wanted to invite Rosalia for her very first dance. The girl refused outright. She turned away and ignored him. Seeing Rosalia about to walk off, Edmund called out, "Rosalia! I have something to say to you. About what happened last time." Before he could finish, a hand landed firmly on his shoulder. "I clearly told Duke Petros to keep his son in line. What exactly are you doing with my daughter?" The one who had arrived was the Duke. Edmund tried to shake off the man's grip, but it was impossible. "Throw him in the dungeon. Don't release him until the party is over." Rosalia was thoroughly exasperated. Just then, Simon found the Duke. There was a matter that required his attention. The Duke reluctantly gave Rosalia a gentle pat on the head and said he would come find her shortly. Then he followed Simon and left. He's always so busy. Just then, a young man appeared beside her. His face was hidden behind a cat mask. It was Brikey. "Happy birthday, Rosalia. Have you been keeping my brooch safe?" Upon learning she hadn't discarded it, Brake let out a quiet breath of relief. It was something very precious to him. Then, to Rosalia's surprise, he took her small hand and pulled her into his arms. "You know how to dance, don't you? Dance one with me, Mar, will you?" Rosalia had absolutely no intention of agreeing. Yet before she knew it, Brikey was already leading her in the dance. When the song ended, the knights who had been waiting nearby immediately took Brikey away. Though Rosalia found the whole situation exasperating, everything that had happened today felt fresh and new to her. It was the first time she had ever been the center of attention, and the first time she had ever received birthday wishes. A profound sense of happiness wrapped itself around her. She had believed this happiness would carry on throughout the rest of her life. But danger had already arrived. On her very first birthday, the little beggar girl received 2 winged horses. Rosalia was astonished. The guests around her hadn't expected the Duke to give such a lavish gift either. They marveled at the Duke's wealth. Rosalia, meanwhile, had already eagerly climbed onto one of the horses' backs. And then she unexpectedly caught sight of a familiar figure. She wondered whether she had seen that person before. But the horse had already spread its wings. It carried her up into the air. The horse is on a tether, it can't fly very high. At that moment, Rosalia had no idea danger was about to strike. She was excitedly taking in the view from above, completely unaware that the horse beneath her had been startled. Then came a sharp whinny. The horse broke free of its tether and bolted into the open sky. The Duke froze. Though Simon had warned him moments ago that signs of an intrusion had been found, he hadn't imagined the danger would surface here of all places. Just then, Urian rushed over and leaped onto the back of the other horse. The Duke moved to stop him, but it was already too late. Urian had already set off in pursuit of Rosalia. Rosalia was trembling all over. Her eyes were wide, filled with terror. Urian drew alongside her. He called out for her to grab his hand. After a brief moment of hesitation, the frightened girl trusted him and reached out. But just as Rosalia seized Urian's wrist, the 2 winged horses beneath them let out another cry in unison and flung them both off. Falling through the air, Rosalia was in a panic. Fortunately, Urian wrapped her tightly in his arms. They plummeted straight down. There was a dull, sickening thud. Drops of blood began to stain everything around them. Rosalia had not yet lost consciousness, but the pain was so overwhelming that she couldn't make a sound. She looked at the unconscious boy beside her. Rosalia knew she could not lose consciousness now. No matter what, I have to do something. But she was powerless. In those last moments before she blacked out, all she could do was pray to heaven. "Please, save Urian." That same moment, a brilliant sacred light burst forth. When Rosalia opened her eyes again, she found herself in a completely unfamiliar place. Books were stacked all around her, and her body felt light. The pain from moments ago had completely vanished. Is this the afterlife? But why are there only books here? The next moment, Rosalia blinked in confusion. For some reason, this place felt strangely familiar. Just then, the sound of footsteps came from behind. When she turned around, there was no one to be seen, but she could still hear someone walking. She hurried forward to follow the sound. When she peeked around a corner, she found 4 small spirits. At the arrival of this unexpected intruder, the spirits were greatly startled. They chattered away, demanding how she had the nerve to come back. But this was Rosalia's very first time here. The irritated little spirits spoke in a language she had never heard. Yet Rosalia found she could understand every word. So you're saying a silver-haired human came here and destroyed a book, and now you're in the middle of repairing it? She glanced at the book near their feet. Rosalia couldn't contain her curiosity. She reached down and picked it up. The spirits tried to stop her, but their hands passed right through her arm. There are water stains all over this. So many words have been smeared beyond reading. Cordelia is considering whether to simply have Urian killed. After all, even the imperial family is in her hands. Seeing Urian's name appear in the text, Rosalia thought of the boy she had seen lying in a pool of blood. She couldn't understand why this book described Cordelia wanting to have Urian killed. Just then, the little spirit declared that this was a book she herself had written. Before the stunned Rosalia could ask why, she was suddenly yanked backward by an invisible force. Rosalia was completely helpless. She could only watch as the little spirits grew smaller and more distant. And through the sound of the Duke's voice calling her name, the girl opened her eyes. "Rosalia, you're finally awake." Looking at the Duke's frantic face, Rosalia murmured in confusion, "I'm not dead?" "Don't say such unlucky things. You've been unconscious for a full 2.5 days. Do you have any idea how worried I was? It's all my fault. I shouldn't have given you something so dangerous." Hearing the man berate himself, Rosalia spoke up to comfort him. "Uncle, I'm all right, and I want to thank you. I've never received birthday wishes from anyone before. Without you, I might have gone my whole life without ever knowing what this felt like. No beautiful clothes to wear, no delicious food to taste. And the greatest gift of my life is you. Oh, where is Urian?" Through the Duke's words, Rosalia also learned of Urian's condition. A normal person falling from such a height would have broken their neck or ruptured their organs, a death on impact. Yet Urian had not died. There wasn't even a visible wound on him. Hearing this, Rosalia's face softened with relief. But then she grew puzzled about the absence of injuries, for she had clearly seen the boy lying in a pool of blood. It is indeed strange. He's currently being examined to see whether the curse has worsened. The imperial family's curse is unlike others. It feeds on the host's vitality to sustain itself. Since that day, Urian has had frequent episodes, experiencing an intense craving for blood. In short, and his curse has taken a very grim turn. Hearing this, Rosalia couldn't help but feel deeply worried for Urian. While Rosalia was resting and recovering, she noticed a mechanical bird had landed on her windowsill, a single ice blue rose in its beak. The little beggar girl, on the very first birthday she had ever celebrated, had nearly lost her life. Thankfully, the boy had thrown himself into danger to save her. Though Urian had not died, the curse within him had grown worse. It had turned him into something that craved blood. Rosalia couldn't help but worry for him, but her own body was still so battered that any movement was agonizing, and she had no way to go see him. But during this time, she also learned that it was Daniel who had tampered with the winged horses, and under the weight of guilt and pressure, he had turned himself in. Rosalia thought back to that day. If Urian hadn't wrapped her in his arms, she would certainly have died. Just then, a sound from outside the window broke her thoughts. A small mechanical bird had perched on the windowsill. In its beak, it held a cluster of ice blue roses. She watched as it flew toward her. Rosalia noticed a note tied to its leg. She unfolded it. "To Rosalia, I heard you've woken up, so I wanted to write. I very much wanted to come and see you, to bring you these, but certain circumstances have kept me from visiting. These flowers are my gift to you. Thank you for becoming a part of House Valencia. Next time, I'll bring you a rose as beautiful as you. P.S. I just wind the key on this little bird and it will fly back to me." Though the letter bore no signature, the moment Rosalia read the first line, she knew exactly whose hand had written it. She couldn't help but admire not only how handsome Urian was, but how beautiful his handwriting was too. Just as Rosalia was about to write him back, she found herself frustrated. The paper was too small for everything she wanted to say, but there was nothing to be done. When Rosalia had finished her reply, she wound the key on the little bird and sent it back on its way. Not only did she write back, she also spent 2.5 days creating a painting to send him, and so the days passed one by one, and Rosalia gradually recovered. Then one day, the return of an unexpected visitor shattered the peace. It was the Duke's younger brother, Lorenzo. He had already heard that his cold and aloof older brother had taken in an adopted daughter. He headed straight for the Duke's chamber. "Second brother, I heard that after Urian was out of immediate danger, his condition actually worsened. You needn't worry, he has the same character as your sister. He is a remarkably strong child." But the Duke cut him off. "Not your sister. and his craving for blood is growing stronger with each passing day. Once wild beasts can no longer satisfy his hunger, his target will become people. Now, go see him. A diagnosis requires you to examine him yourself. But Lorenzo refused the Duke's suggestion. Before that, he had something far more important to attend to. That was visiting Rosalia, who had been dressed up in a bunny outfit. When she heard this newfound uncle summoning her over, Rosalia's lips puckered. She was not at all pleased. Second brother, look, Rosalia doesn't seem very happy. Rosalia immediately protested. I'm already 8 years old. An 8-year-old would never wear this. But her protest had absolutely no effect. Lorenzo had already been completely charmed. He stepped forward, wanting Rosalia to call him uncle. But the girl wouldn't agree. After all, she only called the Duke uncle as well. A dejected Lorenzo squatted in the corner and occupied himself counting ants. The Duke reminded his brother to mind the time and go see Urian. Are you going to see Urian? Can I come along? Before Rosalia could finish, Lorenzo refused. Urian is very seriously ill right now. Only doctors are allowed to see him. Rosalia looked down at the floor, quietly despondent. She asked Lorenzo to let her know how Urian was doing when he returned. After all, Urian hadn't written to her in some time, and she couldn't help but feel a little anxious. But when night fell and the house grew quiet, Lorenzo still hadn't come to find her. Rosalia's lips puckered once more. She picked up a piece of charcoal and set off to take revenge on the sleeping Uncle Lorenzo, intending to draw all over his face. Walking down the silent corridor, she heard hushed voices coming from the Duke's room. Her curiosity stirred. Just as she was about to enter, the voices from inside made her hand freeze on the door. You're saying Rosalia is not the saintess? If you ignore the eyes, she looks exactly like the missing Chrysaean. Some might even believe Duke Olarissa had somehow been transformed into a little girl. And yet you say Rosalia is not the saintess? Has she undergone the Holy Emperor's examination? The Duke had no desire to hear the Holy Emperor's name. He told Lorenzo to drop the subject. You only recognize the resemblance because of your sharp eyes. Besides you, only Duke Olarissa would ever connect the two of them. And given that he rarely appears in society, no one else is likely to notice. This left Lorenzo puzzled. After all, even if Rosalia was not the saintess, based on her face alone, she had to be the daughter of Duke Olarissa and Rosalind. The room fell into sudden silence. Rosalia touched her own cheek. She thought, do I really resemble that person? But why did the book never mention this? Don't tell me you intend to use her. Even if the true saintess is someone else, she is still Rosalind's daughter. We can have Rosalia pose as the saintess to buy us time. And Urian has suffered a severe shock. He truly does not have much time left. Even if by some miracle he were to recover, ultimately you would still have to choose between the two of them. Either Rosalia or Urian? Though it seems to me you've already made your choice. Adopted by a villainous duke, she had just overheard that the boy who had saved her life was about to die. A wave of anguish surged through Rosalia. He's so young. In the book of the future she had read, Urian hadn't died at this age. The girl blamed herself entirely. Just as she turned to go back to her room, Lorenzo caught the sound of movement. He suspected someone had been eavesdropping. But when he stepped outside, he found no one. Just as he was about to go back inside, he spotted the piece of charcoal Rosalia had been holding. Faced with the Duke's questioning look, Lorenzo rubbed the back of his head and quickly claimed he had been mistaken. Back in her room, Rosalia hugged her knees to her chest, replaying the words she had overheard over and over. No one knew how much time passed. The girl finally noticed that the charcoal she had been holding was gone. And at that moment, the bedroom door opened. Rosalia startled. She quickly dove under the covers and pretended to be asleep. At the sound of the door closing again, Rosalia assumed whoever it was had left. Just as she let out a breath of relief, she saw Lorenzo sitting at her bedside. You should keep better track of your things. Never let your guard down. You must be meticulous, leave not a single trace behind. Only then can you turn the tables and become the hunter. Hearing Lorenzo's cryptic words, Rosalia gripped the covers tightly, understanding that her eavesdropping had been discovered. The following morning, normally she would have finished everything on the table long ago. To avoid arousing the Duke's suspicion, Rosalia forced herself to eat bite by bite, all the while staring across at Lorenzo. It seems Rosalia is quite fond of me. Well, I suppose that's only natural, given how handsome I am. Faced with his self-congratulatory remark, Rosalia was too speechless to respond. Just as Lorenzo was about to set off for Urian's estate, he found Rosalia waiting for him. Did you tell Uncle about what I overheard last night? Hoping to draw Rosalia closer, Lorenzo had said nothing to the Duke. Since we share a secret now, how about you and Uncle become friends? But Rosalia flatly refused. That said, if he could take her to see Urian, perhaps she would reconsider. This put Lorenzo in a difficult position. Didn't you say he doesn't have much time left? Just let me see him. Lorenzo looked at Rosalia's resolute expression. In the end, he relented. All right, Rosalia, you are Urian's family too. Then let's go. But if you feel the urge to run, tell me immediately. This left Rosalia baffled. When they arrived at Urian's estate, Rosalia was met with a scent, a mingling of candle wax and blood. When they reached Urian's room, Rosalia saw the boy lunging toward her, his limbs bound in chains. His crimson eyes held not a trace of feeling. Urian could no longer even speak in human language. His older brother had pleaded with him again and again, yet Urian had recklessly used his ice magic regardless, with no thought for his own body. He had frozen everything around him, and it was this that had caused his curse to worsen. It was then that Rosalia understood. The ice-blue roses Urian had sent her were ones he had conjured through his own magic. Aren't you his family? If you're truly his family, then how can you treat him this way? In Rosalia's mind, family meant people who stood by you unconditionally, people who would weep for you. She couldn't understand why the Duke and the others would treat the boy who had saved her life this way. But she didn't know. This was exactly what Urian himself had asked for, solely so he would not harm innocent people. It was the only way to preserve whatever shred of humanity remained in him. But for Rosalia, it was unbearable, for Urian had once promised to bring her blue roses the following year. Rosalia, you must understand, blue roses do not exist in this world. Rosalia fell silent. Urian had promised to give her something that did not exist anywhere in this world. And that promise could be read in more than one way. Perhaps it meant he would find a way to bring the impossible into being. Or perhaps it meant he would never have the chance to give her a birthday gift next year at all. Rosalia then tossed the doll she had been holding to Lorenzo. She picked up the mechanical bird Urian had destroyed, which lay on the ground. She understood now why he had stopped writing to her all this time. Looking at Urian before her, Rosalia recalled what he had said when he saved her. She reached out her hand without thinking. But the next instant, he seized her by the wrist. His blood-red eyes blazed with a terrible intensity. He gritted his teeth and tightened his grip with crushing force. Urian, tomorrow morning you will still be here to greet this world, because I will find a way to heal you. Lorenzo, snapping to his senses, immediately swept Rosalia into his arms and carried her out. Rosalia gazed quietly at the boy still inside the room until the door closed between them. Left behind was a boy who had lost all semblance of humanity. And a few days earlier, the moment Urian had regained consciousness, the first thing he had asked about was Rosalia. It was only upon hearing from the Duke that the girl was all right that he had finally allowed himself to breathe. As the sun descended that evening, so that Rosalia wouldn't worry about him, Urian had sought out paper and pen and written her a letter. Looking at the blood-stained papers scattered across the floor, Urian understood. This was not the first time he had come to his senses. Back at the Duke's manor, Lorenzo immediately saw to bandaging Rosalia's hand. The Duke hurried over as well. After scolding his brother, Rosalia, who had been silent for some time, finally spoke. Uncle, I want to go back to the place where I used to live. Rosalia wanted to return to the place the book had described as where the Saintess would be found. After all, the only way to save Urian was through the sacred power of the Saintess. But the Duke assumed she was frightened of Urian. He assured her the estate was heavily guarded. Urian would not escape to the main city again. I am not afraid of Urian. The man looked at Rosalia in silence. Recalling Lorenzo's mention the night before of someone eavesdropping outside the door, something seemed to cross his mind. All right, I understand what you're thinking. Get some rest. With that, he turned and left. The Duke had no intention of letting Rosalia go back. For when he had first brought Rosalia to his manor, he had personally dealt with that vile woman who had deserved far worse and had helped the other children begin a new life. But he hadn't known how deeply Rosalia despised that woman. Once she found she had nowhere left to return to, she would surely resent him for it. And she might even. The sun slipped below the horizon. Meanwhile, Rosalia was packing her things. She knew that if she simply walked out, the Duke would never allow it. Even if she claimed to know from a book where the Saintess could be found, the Duke would never believe her. Adults simply didn't listen to children. And besides, Rosalia couldn't bear the thought of watching him try to stop her face to face. The truth was, Rosalia didn't want to leave. But to save Urian, she had no other choice. She sent the repaired mechanical bird on its way. The girl slowly fashioned a rope from a length of cloth. She prepared to climb down from the balcony. But just as she tossed the rope over the railing, the mechanical bird came flying back, and from below came a sharp cry of pain. Rosalia was completely bewildered. She peered down to see Lorenzo staring at the rope in his hands with a puzzled look. Spotting Rosalia on the balcony, Lorenzo understood exactly what she was up to. Don't tell me you were planning to climb down with this. One good tug and this knot falls apart. You stay right there and wait for me. I'll come up. Rosalia was at a loss for words. She had no idea what Lorenzo was up to now. My little niece playing such dangerous games at the window? How could I not come? After making him promise not to breathe a word of it, Rosalia was ready to leave. But when Lorenzo pointed out that the Duke would worry if she disappeared, Rosalia fell silent. She thought of all the care the Duke had shown her. The girl said the opposite of what she truly felt, insisting he certainly wouldn't worry about her. Then let's find out. Let's see how second brother reacts once you disappear. I'll help you run away from home. After 2.5 hours of preparation, Lorenzo had Rosalia ready and they were about to slip away. He told her this was the safest approach, but the girl just wanted to punch him. Just then, they walked straight into the Duke. Where are you going? And what is that bundle? Inside it, of course, was Rosalia. When Lorenzo claimed it was a gift for a friend, the Duke didn't give it a second thought. The thought that Rosalia wanted to return to the slums left him certain he hadn't done enough for her. Lorenzo had watched the change in him. He asked how the Duke planned to handle things with Rosalia. I want to tell her gradually so she won't be so hurt. I can't keep the truth from her forever. Sitting inside the moving carriage, Rosalia finally poked her head out. Rosalia, you heard all of that, didn't you? Do you still want to leave? The girl gave him a definitive answer. Yes. Everything was for Urian. According to the book, that day should have been the day the Saintess discovered the Duke. After saving him with her sacred power, she was to formally become the Saintess. Afterward, she returned to the alley for charity work, and it was there she first encountered Rosalia. The Saintess, herself an orphan, had lived in that very same alley. The two of them had always been near each other without ever knowing it. Just then, Lorenzo gathered up the blanket bundle in his arms and cut off Rosalia's train of thought. But when they returned to the place she had once called home, Rosalia was at a loss. Though she had been adopted by a duke, dressed in fine clothes and given the finest food every day, the girl had still come back to the slums to search for the Saintess the book had spoken of. All because she had accidentally overheard that Urian, the boy who had saved her, was about to die. Only the sacred power of the Saintess could free him from the curse, a boy so terribly young. But when she returned to the alley she had once lived in, the residents all said there was no silver-haired girl of Rosalia's age named Cordelia here. Rosalia didn't know what to do. Moving to another district was dangerous. The gangs who collected protection money carved up the territory ruthlessly. Children from the alleys never strayed outside their own patch. Leave your zone and the local gang would beat you for it. And if she couldn't find the Saintess, then her coming back here had been entirely pointless. But she recalled the Duke as the book had described him, and Urian, and Bryke and Edmund, all exactly as the book had written them. Yet why the Saintess had not appeared, that she had no way of knowing. Meanwhile, as Lorenzo searched for the girl Rosalia had described, he accidentally turned up information about the gang that had operated in Rosalia's old alley. They had vanished overnight without a trace, and the timing of their disappearance was the exact same night Rosalia had been taken in. Lorenzo said nothing of this to Rosalia. He had already guessed. This was the Duke's doing. Just then, Lorenzo suddenly spotted something. He immediately scooped Rosalia up and took off running as fast as he could. Rosalia, looking back, also spotted the figure behind them. The Duke, his expression dark. The moment he'd realized Rosalia was gone, he had come immediately. He never imagined his own younger brother would pull something like this. They ran, no one knew how far, and until the Duke had vanished from sight behind them. Only then did Lorenzo let out a breath of relief. You said he wouldn't come looking for you. Well, looks like I was right all along. Second brother is very worried about you. You saw how he came after us. The look on his face. Rosalia lowered her head. If there were a Saintess, would everything be different? Looking at Rosalia before him, Lorenzo thought of the ancient text he had once read. The Saintess's blood is said to be like wine and her eyes like precious stones. They say her very flesh could make a person whole and perfect. But it's far too early to speak of such things. If you were the Saintess, you could indeed solve many problems for the adults. But those problems are not yours to carry. So even if you chose to do nothing, that would be perfectly fine. Which is to say, just live however you wish. Being true to yourself is enough. Rosalia didn't understand why he was telling her all this. But when Lorenzo casually reached over and began ruffling her hair, Rosalia's patience snapped. She grabbed a fistful of his hair and refused to let go. Just then, from behind them came the voices of two knights asking passers-by if they had seen him. Lorenzo recognized them at once. They were knights of House Olarissa. It seems word of second brother wandering through Olarissa territory has already reached Duke Olarissa's ears. After 2.5 minutes of deep thought, Rosalia finally decided to return to the Duke's side. Didn't you say you wanted to go back to the place you used to live? Uncle has been missing me this much. What can I do? As the one and only Rosalia in all the world, of course I have to go to him. Though she had ultimately failed to find Cordelia, this also meant Rosalia had an excuse to go back and stay a little longer, even if only for a fleeting moment. She was willing. All she wanted now was to return to the place where someone loved her. Just as Rosalia was following Lorenzo and preparing to head back, she had drifted into her thought. And when she reached out and tugged at the back of the man ahead of her, she realized it was not Lorenzo. Rosalia froze, bewildered. She stood completely alone in the middle of the street. Only then did they each realize they had lost one another. Honestly, a grown man like that, look away for a moment and he's already gone. Meanwhile, Rosalia's stomach growled. When she came to a small street stall and took out Bryke's brooch to trade for a crepe, the stall-keeper looked at what she had produced and immediately startled. She quickly loaded Rosalia up with a whole stack of crepes. Then she asked if the girl had gotten lost. Is it that obvious? Because you're clearly a young lady from a ducal family, yet you have no attendants, and you're wandering all alone. How about this? You enjoy those while I go find a knight to help you. Rosalia had no idea the woman had mistaken her identity, assuming she was trying to return to House Valencia. But when she saw a carriage bearing the House Olarissa crest before her, though Rosalia hesitated for a moment, the thought that the Duke might have already met with Duke Olarissa put her at ease. The stall-keeper also returned the brooch she had been given. Though Rosalia didn't understand why she refused payment, in gratitude for the woman's kindness, Rosalia took out a precious gem she had been keeping and pressed it into her hands. When the carriage brought Rosalia to its destination, she found herself before a manor that was not her home. Had she been tricked? You must be the celebrated young lady of House Valencia. Welcome to Lampet's castle. Seeing a man who looked so remarkably like Bryke, Rosalia was taken aback. She immediately demanded to be taken back. But she learned from Duke Lampets that Duke Valencia had caused a commotion in Olarissa territory and had been detained. You would do well not to return to Olarissa territory right now. If they discover you are the young lady of House Valencia, they will take great interest in you. They might even use your silver hair as a pretext to hold you there. I have already contacted Duke Valencia and told him you are here with us. Rosalia couldn't understand what he was after. Just then, Bryke arrived at their side. He was visibly startled to see her. At the arrival of his eldest son, Duke Lampets's expression darkened. He had clearly summoned his other son, Everett, not this one. But things being as they were, Duke Lampets didn't press the matter further. He instructed Bryke to look after Rosalia during her stay. Young lady of House Valencia, since you've come this far, I do hope you will become good friends with my sons. Rosalia understood Duke Lampets's true motive. He had taken her for the Saintess. After all, cultivating ties with the Saintess would prove useful sooner or later. When Bryke led Rosalia inside, the boy who had been silent for so long finally spoke what had been weighing on his heart. I thought you were going to die. Even after hearing you were all right, I couldn't settle my mind. I've been thinking about you every day. Rosalia was a little baffled by his concern. After all, the two of them were barely acquainted. She then took out Bryke's brooch. I didn't know this brooch meant so much to you. I don't need it anymore. Seeing that Bryke made no move to take it, Rosalia let out a sigh. She had no desire to get too entangled with Bryke. She thought, when the real Saintess appears, you'll turn on me faster than anyone. I have no use for someone who shifts with the wind like that, especially someone who lets love blind them and throws others into ruin. Knowing full well that the girl was the daughter of a duke, a boy mocked the doll in her hands as trash picked from a rubbish heap. Rosalia wasn't about to let his age be an excuse. Go look in a mirror before you open your mouth. But for a boy raised in privilege all his life, he genuinely didn't understand what she meant. Oh, you used to live somewhere very filthy? I originally didn't think all that much of the Duke. He didn't think he'd stoop to bringing home a low-blooded little stray, but to think he actually adopted someone from such a place, I find him rather admirable now. When Rosalia heard herself called a low-blooded stray, she was furious. She paid no attention to Duke Lampet standing nearby, insisting his son meant no harm. You're right, I used to live in an alley. You can't imagine how filthy it was. I drank from fountains that might have had spit in them. But so what? Just because I was born an orphan, unlike you, does that mean I deserve to be despised? But do you know what's truly despicable? The way you're looking at me right now, like you're studying a curious insect. That look in your eyes. You think I'm pitiful? How laughable. You said you wanted to get along with me, and yet at your core you look down on me. The final straw for Everett, however, was the words of the brother standing beside him. You kept pestering everyone saying you wanted to meet Rosalia, and this is what you had to say to her? The words had barely left his mouth. before Everett fled the dining room in tears. Seeing this, Duke Lampets had also had enough. Before leaving, he gave Bryke a warning. "You are the older brother. You should be setting an example." And with that, he too left the room. Bryke had long since grown tired of this family. Rosalia looked at the boy's despondent expression and spoke. "You said before that you liked how I don't cry easily, right? The reason they cry is because they believe tears can solve problems. The reason I don't cry easily is because I know my tears have no meaning. So I'm not worth admiring for it. I don't think people who cry easily are foolish. If the adults around me had only comforted me instead of scolding me, I wouldn't have held back my tears either. And you say you don't like children, but you should know. We are all children right now. All right, I'm leaving. You can eat in peace now." Watching Rosalia's retreating figure, Bryke sat in silence for no one knew how long. "But no one here treats me like a child." When Rosalia returned to her room, she lay down on the bed, clutching her stomach. The food over these past few days had left her feeling unsettled. She couldn't help but miss Uncle. Something felt missing. After 2.5 minutes of retracing her thoughts, she remembered she had left her doll in the dining room. Just as she was about to go retrieve it, a maid informed her that the doll was with Bryke, and that she'd need to find him in the courtyard. Though she had no idea what the boy was up to, Rosalia obediently made her way outside. From a distance, she could see a figure sitting in a chair, Bryke nodding off to sleep. Rosalia walked over and shook him, but the boy startled awake and seized her wrist. He pulled her close. "Your eyes, they look just like a morpho butterfly. Do you still hate me?" Rosalia clearly hadn't noticed the unusual feelings Bryke held for her. She said flatly that she would hate him for the rest of her life. She pulled her wrist free and simply wanted her doll back. "Sit here first, I'll return it. By the way, why did you run away from home?" "No reason." "What happened to your hand?" "Nothing." "Why do you hate me?" "Because the way you talk is infuriating." Bryke panicked, and was about to explain that wasn't his fault, when Rosalia cut him off. "Let me ask you something. If a person promised to give you blue roses that don't exist in this world, what would that mean?" In Bryke's understanding, there was nothing in this world that truly could not exist. Technology kept advancing. Who knew? Perhaps bionic machines would be commonplace someday. And it was the same with blue roses. Humanity would surely cultivate them eventually. She decided to stop thinking about it. Rosalia reached out to take her doll back. Clearly, Bryke wasn't ready to let her leave so easily. Even as he spoke, he had already taken hold of her hand. If I shed tears for you, would you turn and look at me?" Rosalia felt a shudder of discomfort. She was speechless at a boy his size behaving so coyly. "Whether you cry or laugh, or even take off your trousers and dance, it's none of my concern. I will not be friends with you or Everett." With that, she rapped him on the head. "And as for crying for someone, save those words for your family or the people you truly cherish." Just as Rosalia finished speaking, someone's arrival interrupted them both. It was none other than Duke Valencia. What exactly do you think you're doing to my daughter?" "I was told my daughter was your honored guest. Yet you dare to press your forehead against her arm? Simply for witnessing someone take advantage of his daughter?" The man was ready to have the boy assigned to scrubbing latrines. Hearing the Duke's protective words, Rosalia felt warmth rising in her chest. "Did you defeat them? Do you think I would lose?" "No." As he spoke, the Duke had already gathered the girl into his arms. "Uncle, I want to go home." As he was leading Rosalia toward the homeward carriage, Lorenzo came running. "Second brother, you actually meant to leave me behind in that devil's den. That's outrageous." At the same time, word of Duke Valencia's arrival reached Duke Lampets, who hurried over with his retinue. "We extended every hospitality to the young lady of House Valencia. Shouldn't you at least offer a word of thanks?" But the Duke was still fuming over what had happened. His expression cold, he lied through his teeth, claiming his daughter had been starved to skin and bone over these 2 days, and that he would never allow Rosalia to come here again. That remains to be seen. Friends can always visit one another whenever they please. Just as I was once friends with Ingrid. Catching sight of Everett peeking out from behind a corner, Rosalia quickly asked the Duke to set her down. She was going to say her goodbyes before leaving. Though puzzled that the girl had made a friend in such a short time, the Duke still set her down. "I am not happy to have met you. Let us never meet again." Lorenzo beside her burst out laughing. "Is that your idea of a farewell?" "Of course. What else would I be saying?" Bryke came over just then, carrying Rosalia's doll. "Rosalia, here it is. Until next time." He kissed her on the cheek. Seated in the carriage, Rosalia was still bewildered. The Duke, expression dark, contemplated what unpleasant fate the boy deserved. "Oh, that child you were searching for earlier? I've been uneasy about it. So I searched one more time, but there truly is no such person. Hearing this, Rosalia's face fell. She couldn't understand why everyone else appeared exactly as the book had described them, while the protagonist alone was nowhere to be found. Cordelia, who are you, really? Just as the girl was pondering how to save Urian, Lorenzo informed her that the boy had recovered, though they hadn't confirmed it with their own eyes. Rosalia couldn't understand why he had suddenly improved. Urian's curse had been so deep-rooted. Even the Saintess had taken a very long time to treat it. With the use of a movement spell, they were back at Valencia Castle in the blink of an eye. As Rosalia stepped out of the carriage, the very first thing she saw was a familiar figure. Quickly, Rosalia! I've been waiting for you. In the familiar dining room, Lorenzo was equally puzzled by the medical report Urian had brought. After all, every episode since encountering Rosalia had been worse than the last. Seeing Rosalia sitting quietly nearby, the Duke assumed she was exhausted from the past few days and told her to go rest. Just as Rosalia stepped out of the dining room, Lorenzo hurried after her. Listen, I know this request is quite unusual. Could I draw a small sample of your blood? The moment she heard draw blood, Rosalia was immediately transported back to what had been done to her at the orphanage. Lorenzo's reason was simple. He needed to confirm whether Rosalia was the Saintess. After all, the moment Urian had come into contact with even a drop of her blood, his curse had been temporarily suppressed. If the results were favorable, perhaps they could conceal the truth for a time and announce Rosalia as the Saintess. Knowing what Rosalia had been through, Lorenzo was awkwardly preparing to take back his request, when Rosalia agreed. Though, since I use my right hand more, I'd prefer you use my left arm. Is that all right? Looking at the girl calmly extending her arm, Lorenzo was speechless. But he didn't hesitate any further. He led her to the sitting room to proceed. But when the needle pierced her arm, Rosalia's mind went blank. No matter how Lorenzo called out to her, she didn't respond. Her pupils were wide and fixed. Lorenzo quickly shook her by the shoulder, and Rosalia came back to herself. After a brief silence, Lorenzo ultimately abandoned the plan. He gave her a gentle pat and sent her on her way. Then he shut the door behind him, leaving a bewildered Rosalia behind. Though it was partly her hatred of having blood drawn that had once driven her from the orphanage, here, somehow, Rosalia felt it would have been all right. And she returned to her own room. Just then, the battered little mechanical bird appeared at her window once more. After reading the note it had carried, the girl rushed out without a moment's hesitation. It was Urian's handwriting. I am waiting for you in the garden. The night was deep and still. Urian was delighted to see Rosalia arrive. I thought you wouldn't come. Why? Because you've been avoiding me. I didn't mean to. Has your condition improved? After assuring her that nothing was wrong, Urian invited her to take a stroll with him. Walking through the quiet garden, is it really all right for you to be out like this? Urian had already received the Duke's permission, and there were knights stationed all around. Rosalia's safety was not in question. That's not what I'm worried about. Urian still misunderstood her. He believed she had run away from home because she had been frightened by what he had become. But Rosalia had never been afraid of him. The Saintess could be said to be the beginning of all the misfortune that awaited Rosalia. Yet she had still gone of her own will to search for the Saintess Cordelia. All for Urian's sake. But Rosalia didn't want to tell him about Cordelia, because in the end, Urian would fall in love with her too. Just as Rosalia was quietly despairing over how childish that thought was, Urian draped his cloak over her shoulders. It seems you're always getting hurt because of me. I'm sorry. Caught off guard by Urian's sudden gesture, Rosalia was flustered. She quickly pulled back and, face flushed, insisted it wasn't his fault. She was the one who hadn't listened to Uncle Lorenzo and had approached anyway. Just as Rosalia moved to return the cloak to him, he refused. She noticed the snake tattoo on his neck shift and stir. Rosalia shook her head slowly. The moment I stare at it, it stops moving. That snake has quite the self-awareness. Walking through the stillness of the night, Urian asked about her days away. The girl glossed over everything in between, but she lit up at the fact that she had, for the first time in her life, paid for food herself. But when she mentioned Lampet's castle, Urian's tone shifted. It seems you and Brikey get along well. Rosalia misunderstood. She thought he believed she had taken his only friend. She quickly assured him not to worry. The two of them were merely acquainted, not friends by any measure. When he asked whether Brikey had said anything unusual to her, Rosalia immediately recalled the scene from that afternoon. She hadn't quite understood what Brikey had been getting at. Seeing that Rosalia hadn't answered him, Urian thought of how both Duke Lampets and Brikey had shown an unusual interest in Rosalia, which was precisely why he had never arranged for the Duke to extend them an invitation. And yet Brikey had still turned up, of his own accord no less. The particular attention Brikey paid to Rosalia sat uneasily with Urian. Even though your birthday has already passed, may I invite you to dance? Rosalia didn't understand why he would ask such a thing, but she agreed anyway. She slipped off her shoes, stepped toward Urian, and gently placed her hand in his. The moonlight fell softly over them both. There were no fine gowns, no sweeping music, no grand and glittering hall, and yet they danced together for a long while on that moonlit stage, and it was enough. The moon hung low. She made Urian promise to come to her birthday celebration the following year without fail. Rosalia hadn't noticed that the boy's curse had begun to stir again. She pulled him gently toward her and draped the cloak around him. Even if you don't bring me blue roses, it doesn't matter. Even if you just, as long as you're there with me on that day. That was all Rosalia wanted now. When the sky began to lighten, the night was over. Rosalia had already fallen asleep. Today I also survived safely, just as you said I would. I will face many tomorrows. Because of you, I held on. Thank you, Rosalia. But his hand moved beyond his control, closing around the girl's throat. She was in truth the real saintess, and yet she had been deceived, always wanting to run away. All because she had read in an obscure book that she herself would be thrown into flames and executed by the Duke's order. But reality had always run contrary to what was written. Taken in as the Duke's adopted daughter, the happy, peaceful life had brought Rosalia more joy than she had ever known. The following morning, Rosalia awoke with no knowledge of what had happened the night before. Fortunately, Urian had managed to regain control of himself in time and had a knight carry the girl safely back to her room. Listening to Emma's worried fussing, the girl felt not the slightest irritation. When she mentioned that Breaky had not cast a sweet dreams spell on her, but had instead kissed her on the cheek, Emma's face remained calm, but her voice turned icy. Next time you see him, kick him hard where it counts. And another thing, the sweet dreams spell is how parents pour their love into their children. Then does that mean I can never receive that spell for my whole life? Rosalia's sudden words left Emma momentarily speechless, but she still asked. The time she had cast the sweet dreams spell on Rosalia, had she slept well? Yes. Good. Then it worked. Because from the moment I saw you, I have thought of you as my own daughter. But one must not cast it on just anyone. It is only for family. Before long, the Duke was taking Rosalia, who had just finished breakfast, out for a walk. When the girl asked about Urian, the Duke said he was at the estate. Nothing serious, I'm just a slight cold. Rosalia still had no idea that the night before she had nearly died at Urian's hands. She was quietly brooding over the fact that he had given her his cloak and then fallen ill himself. The Duke listened to her words with some hesitation. He had no idea either. If my sister were here, she would certainly have kept the two of them apart. Before they knew it, they had arrived at the stables where the winged horses were kept. Looking at the winged horses that had once nearly killed Rosalia, the Duke moved to set a date for their execution. Both the girl and the groom startled. In the Duke's eyes, even if the winged horses were rare magical creatures, since they had harmed Rosalia, they could not simply go unpunished. But they didn't do anything wrong. If they simply die like this? Rosalia understood that the Duke was truly that kind of man. After all, even when his subordinates had captured the wrong person, he had still ordered her death. I hope you won't kill them. They were a gift to me. Can't you spare them, as I'm asking? The Duke looked at Rosalia in silence. Then he agreed. A look of delight spread across the girl's face. The groom, relieved that he would not be out of a job, was equally pleased. He quickly said he would bring in craftsmen to make prosthetic wings that functioned just like mechanical limbs attached to a person. He then asked if Rosalia would like to name them. The girl delightedly agreed. This one is Bob, that one is Binchy. Together, Bob and Binchy. She climbed up onto one of the horses' backs. Though she had been terrified when they flew last time, riding along the ground felt freeing and exhilarating. But before long, seeing Rosalia's eyes glaze over, the Duke immediately lifted her down from the horse. Only then did the girl realize she truly had a fear of heights. On the way back, feeling the approaching warmth of summer in the air, Rosalia realized she had been at the Duke's manor for nearly 2.5 months. Just then, the man called out to her. I wanted to help the children who had been living in the alley with you. Most of them have been successfully placed with families. They have new homes now. And the woman who ran the place, I dealt with her. The Duke had expected Rosalia to be angry, but instead she asked whether he could arrange mechanical prosthetics for the children with missing limbs. He was stunned. After all, he was the one who had destroyed the place she had wanted to return to. Shouldn't she resent him for it? What are you talking about? Isn't this our home? The Duke finally let out a breath. His voice was steady. Of course, this is our home. But happy days are always fleeting. That very day, Simon returned with unexpected news. My lord, The previously missing Chrisen von Olorisa has suddenly reappeared. He is claiming that Miss Rosalia is his biological daughter. She was nothing but a beggar child wandering the streets. Yet after being taken in by the Duke, a political rival was now claiming her as his own flesh and blood. Duke Valencia, upon receiving the news, understood perfectly well that House Olorisa was targeting him. But he didn't concern himself with it. The imperial family had already approved his adoption. Before long, however, House Olorisa, well connected at court, went on the offensive, pressing the Duke to hand over Rosalia. The order also brought up their role in treating Rosalia after the accident. Using this as leverage, they pressured House Valencia, accusing them of acting against all decency by keeping a father from his daughter. The man's expression darkened. Everyone had now sided with House Olorisa. With no other options, the Duke had no choice but to bring Rosalia to the imperial palace. Rosalia, upon hearing the news, had no desire to go. After all, Chrisen von Olorisa, the Saintess's biological father, had never appeared anywhere in the Book of the Future. As if he hadn't simply gone missing. As if he had truly died. What right does he have to claim I'm his daughter? Just because of silver hair, I'm automatically his daughter? Does he think only House Olorisa can have silver hair? Emma understood Rosalia's feelings at that moment. She gently pulled her into an embrace. The reason he's making this claim is mainly because you were brought here by the Duke. Don't worry about what comes next. His Grace will handle everything for you. And the final decision is yours. Even if you choose to go, no one will blame you. And so Rosalia left the Duke's manor with him. The maids were all worried about her departure. Seated in the carriage, Rosalia finally asked the question that had been weighing on her. Why does House Valencia dislike House Olorisa so much? When the Duke was asked whether he could tell Rosalia, Simon explained about House Valencia. As I mentioned before, House Valencia is in the north and House Olorisa in the east. But in truth, the east originally should have been Valencia territory. At the time, the north was known as the Abandoned Lands, far inferior to other regions in both climate and terrain. House Olorisa had no desire for that land, so they had Valencia's representative poisoned into incapacitation, preventing him from attending the assembly, and claimed the east by default. House Valencia, having failed to appear, lost all standing. They were banished to the most barren reaches of the north. From that point on, the two houses have been at odds. And Chrisen von Olorisa does not have a good reputation. Even the previous Duke of Olorisa held him in contempt. So when everyone learned that Rosalind's chosen husband was not the Duke, it came as quite a shock. The Duke immediately silenced Simon. Listening to their exchange, Rosalia turned to gaze out the window. What is love, really? After 2.5 days of waiting, the day finally came for Rosalia to enter the palace. Simon instructed Rosalia not to speak out of turn. Any questions would be handled by the Duke and himself. As for the Emperor, who had gone back on his word, the Duke wasn't overly troubled. After all, the Emperor had already approved Rosalia's adoption. If he reversed his decision now, he would only be disgracing himself. Rosalia, do you remember what I told you before? Yes. You said that members of House Valencia never bow their heads easily. After paying their respects to His Majesty, the man on the throne began taking subtle jabs at the Duke. Getting an audience with you is no easy matter, is it? Looking at Rosalia standing nearby, the Emperor asked the girl her name. My name is Rosalia von Valencia. Olar. Rosalia was mortified that at this of all moments, she had bitten her tongue. Olar. And just then, Duke Olorisa entered. An old man came in, with another man at his side. The man's eyes went straight to Rosalia. A cold, oppressive air instantly settled over her. She couldn't understand why meeting his gaze felt like seeing something dreadful in the dead of night, her skin prickling all over. When the Duke quietly asked her about it, Rosalia didn't voice her unease. Then they got to the matter at hand. Duke Olorisa opened by saying that the moment he laid eyes on Rosalia, he was certain she was his brother's biological daughter. Rosalia was puzzled. Do I really look that much like that man? She has the same blue eyes as Rosalind. I am certain she is the daughter of Chrisen and Rosalind. Duke Valencia, thank you for looking after my niece during this time. As Rosalind's daughter, she would surely possess sacred power. The Emperor suggested summoning the Holy Emperor to confirm this, but Duke Olorisa quickly moved to block the proposal. He stated that what he sought was a member of House Olorisa's bloodline, not the Saintess, and that Rosalind's sacred power had not been innate. Even the Holy Emperor would be unable to provide any confirmation. Rosalia recalled that the book had mentioned neither Chrisen's existence nor any resemblance between them. Everything had diverged from how the book had described events. In the book, it was the Saintess herself who had chosen House Olorisa, and that was how she came to be taken in by them. Why didn't anyone ask for my opinion? At Rosalia's words, Simon looked as though his soul had left his body. Those two silver-haired uncles appeared out of nowhere claiming to be my family, but I don't want to go with them. Shouldn't I have a say in my own life? Your Majesty, how can a child of 8 speak like this? Duke Valencia has surely been putting ideas in her head. And I have heard that my niece suffered a serious injury at Valencia Castle, nearly lost her life, and had to have a high-ranking priest summoned to treat her. I have never allowed any child in my care to face such an accident. This proves beyond all doubt that the unmarried Duke Valencia is wholly unfit to raise a child. The man's expression darkened. He had been holding his tongue, but hearing Duke Olarisa's arguments grow increasingly outrageous, he was about to speak when the Emperor cut him off. He asked Rosalia to step outside for a moment. This matter was not going to be resolved quickly. Rosalia looked toward the Duke. She received a small nod. She had no choice but to comply. She followed the attendant out, glancing back 3 times as she went. Once outside the palace, Rosalia turned the exchange over in her mind. Though the Emperor had put on the appearance of neutrality, he was plainly siding with House Olarisa. Just then, something flew past her without warning. A flaming arrow had barely missed her. The attendant had barely finished asking if she was all right when a blonde boy appeared before them. She looks perfectly fine. The attendant merely reminded him that Rosalia was a guest of the imperial family and asked him to be more careful. Whatever. My life is worth more than hers anyway. But the next moment, everyone was stunned. Your aim is dreadful. With that, Rosalia snatched the crossbow from his hands and leveled it directly at him. Even though this is my first time with one of these, I'm certain I'd shoot straighter than you. The moment she said it, she froze. He is not someone at whom you may point a weapon. A guard had already pressed a blade to the girl's throat. Looking at the guard's cold expression, Rosalia was not afraid. She tossed the crossbow back to the boy. I didn't know, after all, he shot at me first. As the guard sheathed his blade, Rosalia's next words left the boy utterly speechless. Apologize to me. You nearly put an arrow through my head. Every adult around you has already apologized. You can't just let it go like nothing happened. But someone raised in such privilege couldn't possibly bring himself to apologize. Who told you to stand there? Be grateful I'm not demanding you kneel. How old are you? Obviously younger than you. Anyone with eyes could see that. The fact that you're still asking proves your brain is purely decorative. The boy was struck completely speechless. Upon learning that Rosalia was the young lady of House Valencia, and for Urian's sake, the boy decided not to bother with her further and walked away. It was then that Rosalia understood. The blonde boy was Urian's half-brother, Crown Prince Caesar von Ortega. Though he too had feelings for the Saintess, he was far more difficult compared to the other 3. When night fell and the palace grew still, Rosalia, who had been waiting for no one knew how long, received news that left her stunned. You're lying to me, aren't you, uncle? She was a beggar child wandering the streets, taken in by the Duke because she shared the eyes of his first love. The man had promised the girl he would never abandon her under any circumstances, but this time he had broken his word. After a long battle of words, it was deep into the night before Rosalia learned what had been decided for her. The victor was House Olarisa. Faced with the girl's questions, the Duke said nothing. Duke Olarisa came over and placed himself between the man and Rosalia. In the end, Duke Olarisa had no choice but to step aside and allow them to speak. I quickly sent word home and had them bring this to you. After all, this is what you treasure most. Rosalia took the doll and was quiet for a long time. Didn't you say that I belonged to House Valencia? Didn't you say I was your daughter? From now on, am I no longer part of House Valencia? Just then, the Duke placed his hand on Rosalia's head, just as he always had. Don't worry, if you still want to be mine, I will find a way to bring you home. Just wait for me a little longer. And while you're staying at the Olarisa Manor, you don't have to listen to a word they say. You can overturn tables, tear up their clothes, and if he does anything strange to you, bite him. Just as Rosalia agreed, Duke Olarisa seized the girl's wrist and moved to leave. Don't go changing my name is Rosalia. Rosalia hadn't noticed that her sleeve had slipped down, exposing the scars on her arm. That moment was seen by Duke Olarisa. When they arrived at the Olarisa Manor, a young man descended from upstairs. He was Duke Olarisa's son, Raoul von Olarisa. Just as the Duke was introducing the girl to his son as his cousin Cordelia, he caught Rosalia's expression and quickly corrected himself. Raoul showed no pleasure at Rosalia's arrival. His golden eyes were filled with undisguised disdain. Duke Olarisa then asked Raoul to show Rosalia to her room. As they walked, Rosalia reminded Raoul not to get her name wrong, which suited him just fine. The open hostility radiating off him made Rosalia feel he was genuinely insufferable. When Rosalia was shown to her room, she looked it over without complaint. She didn't care where she stayed. After all, she would only be here a few days before Duke Valencia came to take her back. I'd advise you not to trust him blindly. After all, the fact that you're here now already proves that Duke Valencia has abandoned you. Rosalia was certain that the uncle who had made her a promise would come back for her. Raoul found this entirely unrewarding. He turned away. I feel like that doll looks rather like you. Rosalia understood what he meant. A worn-out doll dressed in new clothes, out of place, incongruous. Just like her right now. As the door slowly closed, Raoul glanced back at Rosalia inside, clutching her doll, and an inexplicable smile touched the corner of his mouth. Meanwhile, in Duke Olarisa's private chambers, he reflected on the war of words with Duke Valencia. He didn't care in the slightest whether Rosalia was truly of his bloodline. He had fabricated a charge against Valencia regarding the child, and that was how he had successfully taken Rosalia away. Before long, the imperial family would be sending a physician to confirm her condition. Just to be safe, have someone draw a little of her blood while she's asleep. Duke Olarisa's words startled the steward standing beside him. There are faint needle marks on her arm already. If we draw blood at those same spots and pin it on Duke Valencia, he'll have no way to defend himself. With even the Emperor on our side now, we cannot allow any of this to fall apart. Just then, Raoul shoved open Duke Olarisa's door. He demanded to know if his father truly intended to keep Rosalia. After reprimanding Raoul to mind his manners, the Duke dismissed the steward. This is about Cordelia, isn't it? I know you feel sorry for that girl. Did she come to you and complain about the attic? Or did she ask you to plead for her? No, she didn't. Blind sympathy is nothing but a useless stumbling block. She doesn't need your help. Yet you think of nothing but her well-being. That will only bring trouble upon yourself. As the sky began to lighten toward dawn, a figure appeared at Rosalia's bedside. A maid stood there holding a syringe, trembling with nerves, sweat running down her face, yet unwilling to disobey the Duke's orders. The maid shakily pulled back Rosalia's sleeve, preparing to pierce the girl's arm. Just then, Rosalia woke. What are you doing? The maid had not expected her to wake and frantically hid the syringe behind her back. Seeing the maid refuse to answer, the girl demanded she show what she was hiding immediately. The maid was too frightened to say a word. The steward had specifically told her not to let Rosalia find out. She claimed she had come to bring Rosalia a change of clothes. The girl immediately got up and followed her out. When Rosalia put on the new clothes, she found they fit surprisingly well. And yet Simon had once told her that House Olarisa had no girl her age. But the room she was staying in was unmistakably a girl's room, with many girls' clothes in the wardrobe. The maid, thinking she had escaped, moved to leave at once. But Rosalia stopped her. In her hand was the very syringe she had just taken from the maid's pocket. Were you planning to draw my blood with this? Or stab me with it? The maid hurriedly denied everything. Just then, Raoul, having heard the commotion, walked into the room. When Rosalia told him the maid had been about to use a syringe on her, Raoul was unconcerned. But when he saw the dress the girl was wearing, he seized her by the arm and barked at her to take it off. Take it off now. Rosalia had no intention of listening to him. She shook his hand away. You're telling me to take off my clothes, and are you out of your mind? Besides, I found this in your family's wardrobe. Raoul was silent for a moment. He sent the maid out. His gaze turned cold as he told her she had better think carefully about how to explain herself. Then he reached for the syringe in Rosalia's hand. Rosalia had no desire to deal with him. She pointed at the door and told him to get out. Looking at Rosalia's resolute expression, Raoul found himself with nothing to say. Upon learning that the attempt to draw blood had failed, sleeping sedatives were added to Rosalia's food, and preparations were made to try the scheme again. Whether Rosalia would detect the tampering remained to be seen. All in pursuit of defeating a political rival, the man was resorting to drugging a young child in order to draw her blood. Although Rosalia had no knowledge of their scheme, in her determination to return to her uncle's side, she overturned everything on the table. Upon learning that Rosalia had not eaten all day, Duke Olarisa decided to hold a family dinner that evening. Looking at the lavish spread before her, Rosalia had no desire to accept Duke Olarisa's outward show of concern. After all, her uncle had told her, if the Olarisa food didn't look as good as what she had at home, she didn't have to eat it. And at the Duke's manor, everything she used was of the finest quality. Here at the Olarisa house, she couldn't even wear a dress without drawing someone's contempt. Just then, Raoul brought up the scars on Rosalia's arm. Duke Olarisa feigned concern, wondering aloud whether the girl had perhaps suffered mistreatment during her time at Valencia. Rosalia was deeply irritated by their insinuations but couldn't be bothered to explain the truth. What she wanted to know was, if this was a family dinner, where was the man who claimed to be her father? Duke Olarisa had no desire to answer that question and quickly changed the subject. He suggested Rosalia spend more time talking with Raoul. She had no interest in speaking to him at all. Before Raoul could open his mouth, she asked whether House Olorisa had claimed the eastern lands by poisoning House Valencia's representative. Raoul didn't address it directly. He only said the common version of the story involved wine. His evasive answer exasperated her. Wine, after all, could mean anything from fine spirits to poison. Rosalia remarked casually that they were truly despicable. Raoul wasn't angered in the slightest. His family had always taken pride in that legacy. Use your mind well enough and you can win without losing a single soldier. He was cut off mid-sentence by Rosalia's sudden laugh. I think the real reason is that you had no confidence you could win fair and square, so you had to resort to tricks. With that, Rosalia reached for the drink on the table. But in the next instant, Duke Olorisa rose to his feet and snatched it from her hand. He ordered an attendant to bring the girl a different drink. Then he moved to cut her steak for her. Raoul, who had never seen his father act this way, broke out in a cold sweat. Duke Olorisa's reason for all of it was simple. He needed to earn Rosalia's trust first. Days passed. Rosalia had noticed the attendants who never stopped following her. To slip free from their watch, she walked along calmly for a while, then broke into a sudden run, rounding a corner and vanishing from sight. Rosalia was genuinely curious. After all this time, why had the man who claimed to be her biological father still not appeared before her? Did he truly want to see his daughter at all? As she wandered in search of the man's room, she stumbled upon a staircase. On the floor lay a long strand of silver hair. Rosalia picked it up. Just as she was wondering whose hair it could be, she heard footsteps descending the stairs. When the two caught sight of each other, both were startled. The moment Rosalia saw it was Raoul, she felt a small wave of relief, but his expression was cold and severe. He struck Rosalia across the cheek. The air went absolutely still. Rosalia had not expected that simply wandering the halls would lead to this. A moment passed, and Raoul finally registered that he had just struck Rosalia. Rosalia had no intention of letting it go so easily. She puffed up her cheeks and drove her fists into him. What did I do wrong? Tell me, what exactly did I do wrong? I don't want to be around you either. Do you think I wanted to come here? Whether it's you or Brikey or Edmund, I wish none of you had ever appeared in my life. Is that my crime? Because I didn't know my place and refused to live quietly? Breaking apart, Rosalia finally let out everything she had been holding inside. As she continued to strike at him, Raoul seized her by the wrist. His tone left no room for argument. Let go of me or I will never forgive you. Before long, the imperial physician arrived at the Olorisa manor. Seeing the clear mark of a blow on Rosalia's face, the physician was visibly shaken. Duke Olorisa hastily explained that the two children had been playing rough. Looking at the disheveled, beaten-looking Raoul, the physician decided not to press further. As Rosalia's examination was underway, Duke Olorisa massaged his aching head. Upon learning that Rosalia had been stopped before ever reaching the attic, he finally felt some relief. Still, he told Raoul not to act on impulse, not to let his emotions show, and that for the time being he was not to see Rosalia. When the physician completed her examination, she had no way of knowing that the scars on Rosalia's body were the result of abuse suffered at the orphanage. Since the exact time the scars were inflicted was unclear, and Rosalia had recently received treatment from a priest, the physician stated that, aside from the children's altercation, she would report everything else faithfully to the emperor. After the physician was seen off, Duke Olorisa asked Rosalia why she had gone toward the attic. Upon learning she had been searching for the man they called her father, Duke Olorisa sent a guard to bring Chrysaon over. Rosalia didn't understand why he had agreed so readily this time, but thinking back to how agitated Raoul had been, Rosalia asked Duke Olorisa whether something was being hidden in the attic. It's nothing, just a storage room. Duke Olorisa redirected Rosalia's attention to Chrysaon, but something was clearly wrong with Chrysaon. Whatever Duke Olorisa told him to do, he obeyed without a single word, mechanical as a puppet. When Chrysaon embraced Rosalia, a chill shot through the girl instantly. She felt his body as bone-cold and rigid. His beloved daughter was right here, injured, and the man showed not the faintest flicker of emotion. When word came that Duke Valencia was standing at the manor's front gate, Duke Olorisa was immediately alarmed. He ordered that no matter how much of a scene the Duke caused, he was not to be let in. After all, Duke Valencia had no power to take away a child under imperial protection, and so more days slipped by. Through the maid's idle chatter, Rosalia learned that Duke Valencia had been coming every day. Now she understood why they had been keeping her confined all this time. When night fell and the house was still, Rosalia crept quietly out of her room. She looked at the staircase before her. Just one flight down, and she would see the uncle who loved her. Rosalia believed now more than ever that her uncle would always stand by her side. She made up her mind, the moment they were reunited, she would call him father. Just then a figure appeared. It was the man Duke Olorisa had declared to be Rosalia's father. And Raul, you're going to find Duke Valencia, aren't you? Seeing that she had been found out, Rosalia did not deny it. But Raul had not come to stop her. Because once you're gone, the real Cordelia will come back. Have you ever thought about whose clothes you've been wearing? Whose room you've been sleeping in? While you've been eating well and living in comfort. Do you have any idea how miserably my real cousin has been living? Rosalia was irritated by his inexplicable accusations. She had known from the very beginning that none of those things belonged to her. You are truly laughable. Isn't it simply that you can't stand seeing me eat well and sleep peacefully? But I have never once longed for a life of luxury. I have only ever had one wish, and that is to survive. Choosing House Valencia was the one right choice I have ever made in my life. Do you think the jewels you wear are so luxurious? Everything you take for granted was once a dream I could never reach. But I am fortunate in one way. At least someone like you, who would leave me to burn without a second thought, is not my family. Enraged by her words, Raul shoved her hard. Her feet slipped from under her, and before Raul's horrified eyes, she fell backward. In that desperate moment, Rosalia seized hold of Chrysan's sleeve. But to her shock, the man followed the momentum and tumbled down the stairs with her. Raul had a chance to grab her. But thinking back to the words Rosalia had said to him, he stayed his hand and watched helplessly as she fell. When the heavy sound reached them from below, heart scattered across the floor, Chrysan's head had separated from his body. That was the last thing Rosalia saw before she lost consciousness. She recalled what Breaky had once told her. Technology was always advancing. Someday, perhaps, the world might see machines made in the shape of men. Rosalia closed her eyes. Simply because the girl had questioned him. The furious boy had shoved her down the stairs. She had fallen unconscious. Duke Olorisa, upon learning what had happened, was deeply troubled about how to handle the situation, but had no intention of blaming Raul. She slipped and fell on her own. What does it have to do with you? And besides, the needle marks on her arm will now work against Duke Valencia. Raul could not believe those words were coming from his own father's mouth. His father had always taught him to conduct himself with honor and integrity. Yet Duke Olorisa declared with high-minded conviction that everything he was doing was in service of the family's honor. He then told Raul to look after Rosalia in the meantime. At the thought of a cousin tending to his ailing little sister, a strange smile crept unbidden across the man's face. Looking at Rosalia lying in the bed, Raul watched her in silence. At that same moment, Rosalia found herself in the pure white hall once again. The pink-eyed ghosts immediately challenged her on how she dared return. Seeing them move to strike, Rosalia had no choice but to run forward in a panic. In her haste, she ran straight into a man. She didn't stop to think much, only wanting to avoid being caught by the ghosts. This child truly was not the one who damaged that book. Stop chasing her. Rosalia had no idea why the man would speak up for her. When they learned the girl had entered using a key, the ghosts ceased their harassment. Through the man's introduction, Rosalia learned that he was the librarian of this place. The library held records of everything in the world and shared its name with the order. It was called the Akasha. You shouldn't have the power to come here on your own yet. It seems you suffered a serious injury. The key must have activated on its own. Rosalia had always believed this place was a dream. When the man cast a spell, healing her injuries, and told Rosalia that she too could use this ability. She was just about to ask more when she felt the familiar pull again. It seems you cannot yet wield the power. You cannot remain here long. I hope that by the time we meet again, you will have grown. Remember, my name is Yog-Sothoth. But Rosalia did not hear his last words. Raul had no idea Rosalia was already awake and was muttering to himself, I've disliked you from the very beginning. A vicious, filthy child like you could not possibly share my blood. Father brought you here simply because he had other reasons. When I didn't catch you as you fell, that was because I chose not to. Your existence is destined to be a stain on our family. With that, Raul walked out. At the sound of the door closing, Rosalia opened her eyes. She was speechless at his bizarre behavior. She moved her arms. Her body had fully healed, so what just happened truly wasn't a dream. But the moment she opened her eyes, every memory of what she had experienced there was gone. She didn't dwell on it. She unwrapped the bandages and walked out of the room. She set off with quick, purposeful steps, wanting nothing more than to get out. Seeing the staircase she had tumbled down, Rosalia hesitated, just as she was steeling herself to descend. The attendants had already discovered she was not in her room. Rosalia dashed into the nearest room in a panic. Just as she let out a breath of relief, thinking she had escaped their search, she saw the humanoid machine. It startled her badly. She noticed a gem glittering inside the machine's chest cavity. Rosalia had no idea it was the machine's control core. Just then the door opened. Duke Olarissa and the steward entered. They had just discovered signs of an intruder. And Duke Valencia, who had been standing at the gate all this time, was nowhere to be found. After instructing the steward to heighten security and find Rosalia as quickly as possible, the sound of the door closing followed. Just as she was about to stand, she recalled Uncle Lorenzo's words, "Never lower your guard. A hunter always waits for its prey to relax." At the very moment she peeked out, Duke Olarissa had not left the room. He looked at the humanoid machine in the corner. "I must truly be exhausted. I thought I saw Kristen's face shift ever so slightly. That was clearly an illusion." When Rosalia finally peeked out for real, Duke Olarissa was gone. As she rose, she noticed a letter on the table. Jed Fordona. Rosalia felt certain she had heard that name somewhere before. After 2.5 minutes of racking her memory, Rosalia finally remembered. The boy who had humiliated her at the art exhibition. He was the one who had loosened the winged horse's tethers at Rosalia's birthday party and fed them maddening drugs. Because the drug was unusual, there had been an investigation, but Duke Valencia had never been able to determine who was behind the boy. Rosalia now understood. Duke Olarissa had been behind it all along. Everything had been aimed at killing her. He had publicly declared himself her father, yet conspired with others to have her killed. Learning this, Rosalia was shaken to her core. She was now seriously beginning to wonder whether Duke Olarissa had something genuinely wrong with him. But the most urgent thing now was to get out of here. She stuffed the letter inside her clothes and went to the door. Hearing the commotion outside, she understood that stepping out now would mean being caught red-handed. Rosalia had no desire to go to Duke Olarissa, who wanted her dead, or the openly hostile Raoul, or the broken mechanical father. She threw the window open. The ledge was roughly 250 meters from the ground. Rosalia, who was already terrified of heights, felt immediately dizzy. For the sake of escape, she squeezed her eyes shut. She rallied herself. "I can do this. I'm incredible. I'm the best. I will get down safely." The trembling in her voice said everything her words did not. Just then, Rosalia's expression shifted to one of surprise. The mechanical bird Urian used to communicate with her was perched right there on the ledge, watching her. And from below came Urian's voice. At his sudden appearance, Rosalia was both startled and overjoyed. But this was clearly not the time for small talk. When Urian told Rosalia to jump from the window, Rosalia hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. But Urian said his injuries were not her fault. Without her by his side, he was certain he couldn't have held on. "Having you with me? Can you trust me one more time?" Though Rosalia was still uncertain, she chose to trust him. She drew a deep breath and leaped from the ledge. She flew straight toward Urian. "Urian!" A heavy thud followed. Rosalia had landed squarely on top of Urian. Fortunately, she wasn't heavy enough to cause him any harm. In the conversation that followed, Urian learned that Raoul had struck Rosalia without cause, and then pushed her down the stairs. Urian went dark and said nothing, though Rosalia said she had already given Raoul what he deserved. In Urian's mind, the matter was clearly far from settled. As Rosalia looked down at Urian's hand holding hers, she thought back to what Raoul had said to her. "Urian, did you ever think I was dirty?" The boy didn't understand why she would even ask such a thing. His voice was steady. "Never. Not once." Rosalia was deeply glad to hear it. As they left the Olarissa manor, Rosalia was finally reunited with her long-awaited uncle. Seeing Rosalia wrapped in bandages from head to toe, Duke Valencia was seething with the urge to go confront Duke Olarissa that very moment. But when Rosalia opened her mouth and called him father, the man froze. "I missed you so much, father." "I did exactly as you said. I made life difficult for the silver-haired uncle the whole time. I even turned over the food." Listening to Rosalia recount everything she had endured, Duke Valencia smiled and praised her warmly. Seated in the carriage on the way home, Rosalia first gave the mechanical bird back to Urian. Then she handed the Duke the letter and the gem she had taken from Duke Olarissa's study. She explained that the man called Chrisane had been a machine. His head and body were now in 2 separate pieces, and the gem was what she had pulled from inside the machine. When they arrived home with Rosalia, Lorenzo too was taken aback to see the girl covered in bandages. At his dramatic reaction, Rosalia was exasperated. "I'm not covered in bandages everywhere. I'm not a mummy." Lorenzo wasn't entirely sure she wasn't a mummy, but there was something he needed to tell her. Abandoned from the time she was small, surviving by begging, the girl had no idea she was the exalted saintess. Taken in by the Duke as his own daughter, political rivals had falsely claimed her as their niece, and conspired with the Emperor to wrest her from the Duke's care, all to steal the girl's as yet unawakened sacred power. After being struck, pushed down the stairs, Rosalia had endured it all and finally returned to her adoptive father's home. Lorenzo carefully examined her. He was furious to learn who had hurt Rosalia. When he learned from Urian that it was House Olorisa, Lorenzo couldn't fathom why they would treat a child this way. Fortunately, as a precaution, they had converted the doll's eyes into recording crystals, capable of preserving everything they witnessed. And since Rosalia had never been separated from the doll, the recordings were more than enough to hold Duke Olorisa to account. But extracting the recording crystals would require taking apart the doll's body. Still, if Rosalia didn't agree, they could also choose not to use this evidence. Before he could finish, Rosalia agreed without hesitation. After all, she was about to turn 9, and a 9-year-old shouldn't be carrying a doll everywhere. Lorenzo was touched and delighted by her maturity. The following day, Duke Valencia received a summons from the imperial family, as expected. He brought Urian and went to the palace. After nearly 2 hours of arguments, the emperor, growing weary, ordered a recess. Duke Olorisa clenched his fists, seething, convinced that Urian's presence was what had caused the emperor to waver. He had no idea that even without Urian, he was already guilty of mistreating a child. When Raoul stepped outside for some fresh air, Urian followed behind him and called out. He got straight to the point. Was it him who had struck Rosalia and pushed her down the stairs? Without waiting for an answer, Urian grabbed him by the head and slammed it into the wall. You ought to be grateful for the bloodline you take such pride in. If you weren't of House Olorisa, I would have already taken that hand of yours. Crimson eyes fixed unblinkingly on the boy before him. A scoff, but in Raoul's eyes, Urian may have been of noble birth, but he was a cursed prince, fragile, isolated, and dying. And Rosalia was nothing but a grimy, ragged little wretch. Raoul saw no reason she was worth Urian's trouble. For someone with no blood connection to you whatsoever, can you truly treat her as your own sister? She is nothing but lowly and crude. Looking at the boy still refusing to back down, Urian couldn't have cared less. After all, only someone who wants to hide their true feelings resorts to a string of hollow, meaningless words. Seeing his hidden feelings laid bare, the furious Raoul was just about to respond, when Crown Prince Caesar appeared and cut them both short. He acknowledged Raoul's bow with a casual word, and pulled Urian away with him. Raoul watched their retreating figures. He could see now. The Crown Prince had always treated the second prince like a true brother. From the moment Urian's mother died, his stepmother and half-brother had stepped in to fill the void she left. And yet from the moment Urian met them, he had lived behind a mask. They had planned to draw the girl's blood, to carry out their scheme. They hadn't expected the girl to escape, and she had taken with her the letters documenting their dealings with the Fordona family. Duke Olorisa's expression was now twisted with fury. Not only had he lost custody of Rosalia, he had also been forced to compensate Duke Valencia with a rich mine. For a noble of his standing, this was a humiliation beyond measure. A girl beside him offered a half-hearted agreement but blamed him for having been too hasty. It was Cordelia. Looking at the girl before him, identical to Rosalia in every feature except her eyes, Duke Olorisa was furious. Cordelia had promised him there would be no problems. There weren't, but that was before destiny was rewritten. All of this had come about because Rosalia possessed immense sacred power. Cordelia had wanted to take her place. They had forged a book that appeared to foretell the future, one that declared Rosalia would be condemned as a false saintess and thrown into the flames, then executed by Duke Valencia. But Duke Valencia had taken Rosalia in as his own daughter and watched over her with steadfast devotion. Even Cordelia had not anticipated this turn of events. And now the machine that had impersonated Rosalia's father had lost its control core. Every plan had been perfect until this. This is because we let ourselves be caught with evidence against us. And the second prince and Duke Valencia are the ones at the heart of the problem. Seeing the situation clearly, Duke Olorisa said nothing more. He produced the blood drawn from Rosalia while she was unconscious and gave it to Cordelia, telling her to continue unlocking the library, not to rewrite the book again, only to learn what the future held as soon as possible. I will not disappoint you again, father. Everything will be as you wish. Meanwhile, at the Valencia manor, Rosalia looked at the small bear doll, sewn back together. Still worn and tattered as it was, she gently picked it up and cast a sweet dream spell on it, then went to find her father, who had just returned. But upon seeing the bread in Duke Valencia's hand, her expression shifted at once. She immediately demanded he give it to her. This is for after dinner. Hearing that, Rosalia's face fell. Fortunately, Urian gave her his own share. Urian, you are absolutely an angel. Though they had ultimately won custody of Rosalia, Duke Valencia was still worried about Urian's condition. His actions in standing up for Rosalia this time had gone too far. After all, Urian's curse had lately become more unpredictable. If he had been acting under its influence, they needed to be even more vigilant. But Urian had clearly given none of that any thought. In his mind, As long as Rosalia was happy, even giving up everything and including his life was a price not worth mentioning. That same day, Rosalia was playing with Lorenzo, though she ended up sick all over the floor. But from him, she received a surprising piece of information. Could it be that I'm not actually 8 years old this year? Maybe. I grew up long ago. Learning that a soul had been imprisoned inside the machine's control core, the man speculated that souls might be capable of possessing other people's bodies. The girl couldn't help thinking of herself, the dreams that felt real but not quite real, the way her serious injuries healed every time. Perhaps she really wasn't just 8 years old. 10, 20, there was no telling. Lorenzo listened to her murmuring with growing curiosity. The Duke had also quietly come up behind Rosalia and heard what she had just said. Back in his room, he called for Emma. He understood that children of this age all tend to feel they have grown up already. But the words Rosalia had spoken today had set something stirring in him. The young lady does sometimes say surprisingly mature things, but environment has a great influence on children, especially parents or teachers. Could something have happened recently to lead her to this? After 2.5 minutes of deliberation, the man called for Simon and asked about Rosalia's lessons. The young lady learns extraordinarily fast, though we did hit a small obstacle with tone of speech. That's because you don't speak with enough refinement yourself. Hearing the Duke's remark, Simon was bewildered. But he also noted that Rosalia was already literate when she arrived. Teaching her had presented no real obstacles. The man stopped him immediately. From the very beginning, he had assumed it was Simon who had taught her to read. Simon was at a loss for words. Nobody could teach a child to read in just a few hours. As soon as Simon said it, he realized that didn't make sense either, assuming she had learned while begging. What nonsense. Orphanages don't teach 5 or 6-year-olds to read. Does that mean my daughter is a genius? Should I offer my congratulations then? Lorenzo beside them eagerly echoed his brother. Simon was utterly overwhelmed. Yes, yes, you're all geniuses. The man thought back to Rosalia's time at the orphanage. Whoever had been there had left in such a hurry that they hadn't fully erased every trace. It was thanks to that oversight that he had been able to find out about Rosalia. But combining what the girl had said on 2 separate occasions now, the man truly didn't know what to make of it. Meanwhile, at the library within the Valencia estate, Rosalia set down a book. The contents were painfully dull. With so many books here, not a single one contained any information on possession. She went to the man's room not long after. Father, are you busy? Duke Valencia, deeply absorbed in his work, nearly jumped out of his skin. Come sit and wait a moment. I'll have someone bring you a snack. Rosalia was obedient and settled onto the sofa. But the titles of some books on the table caught her eye. The Correct Way to Raise a Child. How to Become an Excellent Father. Noticing this, the man leaped to his feet and insisted those had belonged to the previous Duke. Is that so? Your father sounds like a wonderful man. Hearing Rosalia's words, the Duke could no longer pretend to be occupied. When he learned that Rosalia was looking for books about possession, the Duke suggested she ask his younger brother. Though he is a grown vagrant who gave up the Valencia name, that doesn't stop him from researching all manner of strange things. With that, he took Rosalia to find Lorenzo. Walking down the quiet corridor, looking at the man's expressionless face, Rosalia softly called out, "Father," but his reaction was a little unsettling. It immediately made Rosalia suspicious. "Father, you don't like me calling you that, do you?" It was simply because the girl resembled his first love too closely. The man had taken her in. But every time the girl called him father, the man would react more strongly than he intended. "You don't like me calling you father? But didn't you say I was your daughter? Why is it that every time I call you father, you always look away from me?" Listening to Rosalia's words, the man had no idea how to respond. And this was the girl's very first time having family. She didn't understand his feelings. "If I've done something out of line, I'll just go back to calling you uncle, like before." The truth was the man didn't dislike how Rosalia called him. But at that moment, he offered no explanation. He settled the girl's feelings and led her to a greenhouse garden. He had had it built right after he inherited the Duke's title. Looking at the roses that bloomed in every season, Rosalia understood who he had built it for, even though she had never come here before she left this world. Rosalia didn't know how deeply the man cared for her, or how desperately he wanted to be a good father. "Rosalia, in all of Valencia, who would dare defy me? Yet there was one person who deceived me, and I was completely powerless against it. When I heard that she had already carried another man's child, I was heartbroken, but not at all surprised. If you said you disliked me and wanted to go to the Olarisas, I would have kept my composure and let you go. What I never expected was that you would call me father. Just as this is your first time having a father, it is my first time having a daughter. So it was never because I dislike you that I looked away." Rosalia listened to the man's words. A long-absent smile finally found its way back to her face. I'll wait for you to get used to it." The man was glad, but he was curious about how the girl had learned to read without anyone ever teaching her. Rosalia, for her part, didn't think it was something you could just pick up by looking. "You really are a genius." With that, the man took out something. The very thing Rosalia had intended to steal when they first met. "Everyone has their own secret. And mine is a promise I made to the owner of this lock of hair, to protect her daughter no matter what." She was originally supposed to be called Cordelia, with the same silver hair as the old Olorisa and blue eyes just like Rosalind's. The man believed Rosalia was his first love's daughter, but the girl kept insisting she had no mother. "All children have parents. I hope you won't deny the fact that you have a mother. Otherwise, both you and they will grieve for nothing." But deep down, Rosalia had always instinctively believed her parents had abandoned her on purpose. Jumping to conclusions is a bad habit. You say you won't be sad, but surely you want what everyone else wants. To have a family of your own. Don't you, Rosalia? The girl looked at the man before her. No matter how absurd or laughable what she said might be, the man would always listen and comfort her with care. And he had shared his own secret with her. Rosalia made up her mind. She would tell him, "There was a book I once read. She is truly not my mother. I am absolutely certain of that. That book had you in it, and Urian and me. It even recorded how I would end." The man was immediately shaken. He asked who it was that ended her life. "It was you. You killed me." The man was visibly rattled. "Where did you see that book? No, wait. Who wrote it and made sure you saw it?" Clearly, the man was not going to get the answers he wanted from Rosalia. She had already forgotten when, where, and who had written it. The only thing she knew for certain was that the future was supposed to unfold as that book described. "The day we first met, the person you were supposed to encounter was not me, it was her. But I never told you. I just went home with you. I warned you before. I am not a good child." Having accidentally seen the forged book of the future, the girl had believed it completely. And now she had told her adoptive father the secret. The man did not believe it. After all, it was only a book. He had never had any intention of harming Rosalia. But the girl was deeply conflicted. She didn't want the man before her to hold unrealistic hopes about her, only to end up disappointed. "Because if you grieve, it hurts me too. And that book, I think I saw it before I was born. For all I know, I was older than you at the time." Duke Valencia fell silent. The girl before him was clearly carrying a heavy burden all on her own, yet she was deliberately putting on a light-hearted face, just to ease his feelings. "Rosalia, even if the true daughter of Rosalind you speak of were to appear, I would never abandon you. And in that book, did I treat you as my own daughter? No. That alone is proof that reality is nothing like what that book described. I hope you will not believe it blindly. No matter what, you are always my daughter. I swear it. The ending you saw in that book will never come." The man fell quiet and looked at Rosalia. His mind was made up. Even if the book was fiction, he would spend the rest of his life making it up to her. A lifetime was not too long. He then ruffled the girl's hair and made to take her to find Lorenzo. On the way, he watched Rosalia searching for blue roses. The man thought of the Divine Library, which held records of past, present, and future, a place only the saintess could enter. If Rosalia truly was the saintess, then everything, her unusually mature words, her behavior that seemed to come from knowing all things, would all make sense. But why did Rosalia speak of Rosalind's true daughter as someone separate? Duke Valencia decided he needed to investigate. Lorenzo, though puzzled at why they were coming to him at this hour, was delighted to see Rosalia given his carefree nature. When he heard that the girl was looking for books on possession, Lorenzo immediately sent Rosalia off on her own, telling her to browse freely. He then asked his brother whether he should tell her. She had seen a book that recorded the future and seemed to believe she had possessed someone's body. "You should sit down and speak to her about this seriously." Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. He didn't think Rosalia had possessed anyone. If the age of the soul and the body didn't match, the person would instinctively behave in awkward, off-putting ways. And Rosalia looks perfectly normal. After a while, the girl watched with visible exasperation as Lorenzo scrambled around finding books on possession for her. When he said he'd personally carry the books back, she was at a loss for words. That was servant's work. Rosalia had no idea what the two of them had just been saying about her. The three of them walked through the open hall. Lorenzo brought up the hunting festival coming up soon. Avoiding it won't solve anything. And Rosalia needs to build experience. She'll have to meet the Holy Emperor sooner or later. "And when you were Rosalia's age, and didn't you take down a bear?" Rosalia was astonished and immediately turned to her father with questions, only to be told that the one who had taken down a bear at 8 years old was not him. It was their sister, Uncle Lorenzo. "Then when did you take down a bear?" "I have never taken down a bear in my life. A man as delicate as me. How could I possibly kill a bear?" Though, if you were willing to call me uncle, I just might grow strong enough. Rosalia made a face of pure distaste. Right now, Lorenzo was just a mister to her, nothing more. If you want to hear it that badly, go ask Urian, or have a daughter of your own. That simply won't do. It would be terribly unfair to my partner and child. And besides, I have already made a vow of chastity. He had sworn to his elder sister he would never fall in love or marry. The reason Lorenzo had done so was to preserve the purity of the noble bloodline, since the magic of the ducal house was particularly incompatible with outsiders. So their sister, in order to keep the family tree from growing too complicated. All of this only made Rosalia more curious about that woman she had never met, especially given that she was Urian's mother. In Lorenzo's understanding, impressive didn't come close to describing his sister's extraordinary presence. At the height of her power, just hearing her name would make people tremble and fall. Though we all assumed she would become the next Duke of Valencia, the duchy itself might not have been enough to contain her ambitions. So she defied all expectations and became empress. And so Urian carries an enormous weight, because his mother was so remarkable. Whatever strengths Urian has, they are forever overshadowed by her. Hearing all this, Rosalia was stirred to her core. Back in her room, she made up her mind. I cannot keep living like this. Determined to learn about possession, she found she couldn't understand a single thing written in the books. An 8-year-old girl, thoroughly embarrassed. But thinking about what her father had said, their sister had taken down a bear alone at 9 years old, Rosalia resolved to change who she was. To that end, she went to the Duke's annex and found Urian. Do you hunt bears too? But the boy had no memory of ever doing so. Every time his condition flared, it happened in a dissociated state. Urian misunderstood Rosalia entirely. He assumed she was afraid of the cold winter and wanted a bearskin coat. He had no idea she was simply trying to prove herself. If I can bring down a bear, then everyone will acknowledge me as a true member of House Valencia, right? Nobody had ever said she didn't belong to House Valencia, but Rosalia simply believed if other members of the family could do something, so could she. After confirming with Urian that bears did appear at the hunting festival, Rosalia went immediately to the Duke's room. Father, I want to take part in the hunting festival. Even though every part of him was reluctant, when it came to his daughter's requests, the man was a firm believer in saying yes, though he remained worried about Rosalia crossing paths with the Holy Emperor. That very afternoon, the girl took up a wooden sword and began training under the guidance of the knights. The knights understood the young lady could only really be a spectator at the hunting festival, but so as not to discourage her, they figured they'd catch a rabbit for her on the day. Rosalia had no idea what the knights were thinking. She threw herself into her sword training, and when it was done, she enjoyed the snacks Urian had brought. Urian, and your cookies are as delicious as ever. From the day Rosalia took up sword training, she had been unusually busy, but the girl wasn't acting on a whim. No matter how difficult it got, she was willing to press on. Rosalia had also reached the age when baby teeth start to fall out. If I lose my front teeth, I'm going to look absolutely ridiculous. To put her at ease, Urian told her that when his own front teeth fell out, Lorenzo had teased him about it endlessly. Rosalia immediately resolved to keep her distance from the man when the time came. Your goal of taking down a bear, has that not changed? The girl confirmed it had not. I want to become someone like father, because I truly admire him. So I've made him my role model. Isn't that the same reason you love your mother so deeply? Looking at Rosalia's smiling face, Urian was left completely speechless. Before long, the girl resumed her training under the knight's guidance. But Rosalia stared at the practice dummy before her with clear dissatisfaction. Bears are enormous. Can't we use a bigger one? The knight firmly refused. Absolutely not. This dummy is exactly the right size for your height. Ask again when you've grown. Rosalia was baffled. She trudged home one heavy step at a time. She wanted so badly to grow up faster. Or at the very least to be as tall as Urian. That would do. Come help me. The two of them made their way to a tree. She picked up a stone and had the boy scratch a mark on the trunk at her height. Rosalia clearly had no idea that trees grow at a very different rate than people, though he very much wanted to tell her. Urian carved the mark into the trunk above the girl's head all the same. I need someone to compare against. Go stand over there. In the fading evening light beneath the tree, the girl stood on a stone, rising on her tiptoes. Their distance slowly closed. Urian felt as though a spell had been cast, watching Rosalia's expression of total concentration as the last of the daylight poured down without restraint. The boy was struck breathless. His face flushed red as he watched the girl hop down from the stone. Rosalia didn't notice Urian's expression at all. Looking at the two marks carved into the trunk, let's measure again in 10 years. By then, I'll definitely be taller than you. The boy, cursed as he was, didn't know where he would be in 10 years' time, but he smiled and agreed. Then it's a promise. Beneath the witness of that tree, two children who didn't know what the future held made a solemn pinky promise. They painted a picture of the grown-up future they would one day inhabit, hoping that 10 years from now, they could stand beneath this same tree together. And yet, on the very day Rosalia lost her front tooth, everything changed. An 8-year-old girl was about to attend the hunting festival. Her family was deeply worried. Sitting in the carriage, Rosalia heard her father ask whether she still wanted to take down a bear to prove herself. The girl confirmed she did. She wanted to become as strong as her father, earn recognition from those outside the family. You're still too young to take down a bear. This hunting festival you'll watch as a spectator first. And you'll also be meeting the leader of the order. He has long wanted to see you. Rosalia was surprised he would want to meet her. Does he think I'm the saintess too? I have no wish to meet him. The man smiled and ruffled his daughter's hair, telling her not to worry. If he wants to see you, there are conditions. First, he must remain at least 10 meters away. Second, he needs my permission before speaking to you. And finally, I will not consent to any holy power assessment or saintess evaluation, whatever he asks. Before long, they arrived at the hunting grounds. The nobles were quite surprised to see Duke Valencia arrive. After all, the man had recently been rumored to have mistreated a child and been taken away. And here he was, at the hunting festival not long after. Neither of them paid the gossip any mind. Rosalia asked her father where the bears were. But the man simply picked up a cookie and popped it into the girl's mouth without answering. The warm scene left the nobles stunned. They had never once imagined that the cold and aloof Duke Valencia was capable of tenderness toward anyone. Just then, the girl noticed a pair of people nearby exchanging handkerchiefs. She had no idea it was a gesture of affection. She regretted not having brought a handkerchief of her own. The man anxiously asked what she was thinking. Nothing. I just saw them exchanging handkerchiefs and thought I'd like to join in. Then a butterfly dancing through the air caught Rosalia's attention. She had just reached out to catch it, when the man grabbed her hand. Don't touch it. That is the Holy Emperor's mechanical butterfly. The reason the man was so alarmed was because when the Holy Emperor's body reaches 100 years of age, a boy is chosen and placed inside a tree known as the Angel. 3 days later, that boy takes on the form of the Holy Emperor. He inherits the Holy Emperor's memories, while the boy he once was is no more. The current Holy Emperor was nearing the time to change bodies. Almost no holy power remained within him, so he was using these butterflies, which could absorb others' holy power, to replenish his own supply. Rosalia was deeply shaken by this. Then she noticed a young boy standing not far away. Is that the Holy Emperor? He's so young. The man confirmed it, and told her to remember, never approach him alone. Just then, a woman called out to Valencia. The man turned. A red-haired woman was waving in his direction. It was Duke Petros of the Scarlet Night House. As she drew closer, she caught sight of the girl beside him. So this is the daughter you adopted? She's not even crying at the sight of me and just staring me straight in the eye. But just knowing that House Valencia has a silver-haired child, it really is quite to my liking. With that, she swept Rosalia into her arms and nuzzled the girl's soft cheek. The man's doting father instincts took over, and he promptly snatched his daughter back from Petros's arms. He asked how she was here. Hadn't she been banned from the hunting festival? How had she managed to attend? What can I say? It's my son. He wanted to come, and I had no choice but to petition His Majesty. His Majesty said I had to come and keep watch over him. Otherwise, he'd surely cause trouble. As the woman answered Valencia with helpless exasperation, a scream tore through the air from afar. The nobles who had been chatting quietly moments before erupted into chaos. That's not a person, is it? Look at the size of it. Absolutely not a person. Knowing her son had caused trouble again, Petros made her way to Edmund and asked what he thought he was doing. The redhead was about to answer, when he spotted the fear written across Rosalia's face. He had barely taken a step toward her before his mother seized him by the scruff of his neck and hauled him away. The girl watched the pair of them with resignation. I think it's best we never cross paths again. Go live happily with your mother for the rest of your life. She had come to the hunting festival intending to prove her worth by taking down a bear, but was promptly surrounded by noble ladies, who fed her snacks from every direction. Watching her father receive the same treatment from the crowd, a thoroughly stuffed Rosalia hopped off her chair, intending to take a walk and let things settle. The man was worried and wanted to accompany her, but the girl gave him a reproachful look. You said there were no wild beasts nearby, and you're a grown man. You can't be clinging to your daughter like this. You don't want to end up like Uncle Lorenzo, do you? Valencia was struck speechless. He could only watch his daughter head off on her own. Rosalia came to a patch of forest and settled into the grass, watching her father in the distance talking with others. Just then, a pair of hands covered her mouth. Rosalia thought she was being kidnapped and struggled violently. It was only when she realized it was Breaky that she gradually calmed down. She was puzzled as to how he had gotten here. After all, Duke Lampez had not attended. "I ran away from home. I came because you're here." He spoke softly with feeling, but Breaky had clearly overestimated her ability to grasp the sentiment. "I'm not your guardian. Why are you following me around?" "Didn't I say we'd meet again next time?" Rosalia had no idea how to counter that. He had indeed said those words before, though she hadn't given them any particular weight. "Stand up a moment. I'm going to kick you." Just as the girl was about to act, the man arrived looking for her. Breaky immediately pushed Rosalia deeper into the forest. "I'll take you to see the bears." This only made Rosalia more puzzled. How did he know her goal? But she had already promised to stay with her father. "You call him father, but he isn't your real father." "What does that matter? He is my father. And you should go home. Your father will worry." At that moment, all Breaky wanted was to be alone with her, without Duke Valencia between them. Rosalia would not agree. Her mind held only the promise she had made with her father. "That belongs to my father." When she saw what Breaky had suddenly produced, she snatched it from his hands. Realizing he was not going to let her go back, she pointed it straight at the boy's head. But Rosalia didn't know that using it required the ability to wield magic. She had no choice but to hand it back. At that moment, Valencia also arrived on the scene. Seeing Breaky standing alone with his daughter, the man's brow furrowed. A cold shiver ran through him. The boy had nearly walked off with her. But what he hadn't expected was that the moment the boy saw him, he grabbed Rosalia and used her as leverage. Tension hung between the two men. Rosalia had no choice but to urge the man to comply. "Father, I'm fine. Just stay where he says for now." Then she followed Breaky deeper into the forest. "What are you going to do about angering my father?" "Why don't you go back and apologize to him now? He'll definitely forgive you." Before the boy could answer, a roar jolted both of them. Both froze in terror at whatever stood before them. Even knowing that in the future someone would be cast into a sea of flames and abandoned, the girl told one of those who would be responsible not to give up on life. After calming breakdown, Rosalia left with Edmund to find help, but they hadn't gone far before. Trying to keep pace with the redhead ahead, Rosalia stumbled and fell. It was the sound that made Edmund turn and find Rosalia sprawled on the ground. He hurried over. "Go ahead and cry. I want to see it." Hearing something so absurd, Rosalia's mouth fell wide open. What was this madman saying? And with that, her front tooth fell out. Looking at Rosalia with her missing tooth, Edmund let out a sound remarkably like a pig snorting. Rosalia's face went crimson. "You big oaf! You've lost teeth before too. Why are you laughing at someone else?" After the brief commotion, Edmund finally noticed that the surroundings had gone eerily quiet. The great bear was nowhere to be found. The boy suspected it was his mother. He knew Duke Petros's temperament too well. After being grounded for so long, she'd surely need to let loose properly. A bewildered Rosalia had no idea what to make of those two. She made her way to the hollow tree, only for Brake to see her and immediately ask about her missing tooth. "Don't you dare laugh or I'll leave you here." Before long, Edmund emerged from the hollow with Brike on his back. Walking through the quiet woods, Brike asked Rosalia with an unusually calm expression, "If I died, would my mother grieve?" Rosalia didn't know why he would say something so morbid, but she was certain his mother would grieve for him. Brakey didn't accept her answer. In his mother's heart, there was only his younger brother Everett. There was no room for him. This was also what he had meant to say to Rosalia when she had visited his home. Just then, Brakey broke into violent coughing. Seeing the blood on his hand, Rosalia knew the situation was serious. She urged Edmund to pick up the pace and get back. In the conversation that followed, Rosalia finally learned why Brake's mother despised him. He had a twin brother, who had passed away when they were both very young. His mother could not come to terms with the loss, and so refused to accept Brakey as her own child. So that thought crossed your mind. If that's how you feel, then if you want, I can help. All I'd have to do is leave you here and it would be over. Is that what you want? Brakey clearly hadn't expected Rosalia to say that, but deep down he didn't want that at all. Rosalia knew he didn't. She spoke firmly. "Don't ever say something like that in front of me again. Not even as a joke. And you must be like me. If someone is in danger, never leave the victim behind. That goes for you too, Edmund." As Rosalia's words fell, a furious roar cut through everything. The great bear was close. Rosalia urgently told Edmund to take Brakey and run, but she had clearly underestimated Edmund's confidence in himself. He dropped Brakey on the spot and went to face the beast. At the same moment, the great bear charged in. Edmund drew his sword and met it head-on. Rosalia and Brakey had expected him to make a show of his abilities, but the very next second, Edmund was sent flying through the air by the beast. The situation had become critical. Rosalia urged Bryke to bring out his magic. Gripping his hand, she prepared to channel his power and launch a sneak attack on the bear. But before he could pull the trigger, a tremendous sound rang out from deep within the trees. The great bear collapsed on the spot. Both of them were left frozen in stunned silence. Duke Petros strode out from the distance, dragging something behind her. And alongside her was the very last person Duke Valencia wanted Rosalia to encounter. The Empire's eccentric Grand Oracle, Yog. The girl had come with absolute conviction to catch a bear and prove herself. But when she finally faced one, all she could show was fear. All she could think of was escape. After all, what stood before her was nothing like what she had bargained for. She frantically urged Bryke to knock it out, not realizing she had overestimated him. The boy's expression wavered, his nerves wound impossibly tight. As the great bear was about to catch up with Rosalia, Bryke stepped forward and hit the bear square in the eye. But that was purely luck. His second shot revealed his true aim, hitting nothing but the ground. Rosalia was at a loss. It's that enormous and you still can't hit it. I could aim better with my eyes closed. When she turned around, the enraged bear had already raised its claws. They came down at her. Rosalia froze. In that critical moment, Bryke charged forward and shielded Rosalia from the bear's strike. When a frantic Rosalia reached Bryke's side, blood came from the boy's lips. Bryke knew this was no time to hesitate. He led Rosalia to a hollow tree nearby. Looking at the boy who had been hurt protecting her, Rosalia tore a strip from her clothing and dressed his wound. Bryke looked at the loose, haphazard wrapping. Is this supposed to be treatment? Of course, I treated father this way once before and he recovered quickly. Bryke had nothing more to say. Just before, he had noticed a pouch on the bear's belly and old scarring on its leg, and understood that its young had been taken, driving it to fury. That was why it had attacked them. After all, one didn't ordinarily encounter such a rare magical creature at a hunting festival. Rosalia was just about to ask how they should escape, when footsteps sounded from outside. The two of them immediately fell silent. A hand appeared at the opening of the hollow. The figure had a head of blazing red hair, blood smeared across his face. It was Edmund. The redhead was surprised to find them there. Rosalia was equally surprised and asked if he had seen her father. I have no idea. I got lost too. Rosalia was baffled. After all, she had just watched with her own eyes as he was hauled away by his mother. In the conversation that followed, Rosalia learned why the great bear had attacked them. It was the redhead in front of her who had provoked it. Oh? Were you hoping to keep a baby bear? I don't want one. First, wipe the blood off your face. If I ran into you looking like that somewhere else, I'd take you for a monster and put you down on the spot. Hearing Rosalia's words, once he wiped the blood from his face, he noticed Bryke sitting on the ground. He prepared to use fire to cauterize the still bleeding wound. He told Rosalia to step outside, and the last time he had used fire, she had fainted. Rosalia told him to go ahead. She wasn't afraid. Edmund said nothing more. When the flame touched the wound, Bryke was biting through the pain. We've barely started and you're already struggling. Bite down on something and bear it. Before he finished speaking, Rosalia extended her arm. Bryke, in agony, bit down. Rosalia did it simply to repay him for having saved her just moments ago. One gritted her teeth, one endured the wound, one wielded the flame. 2.5 minutes passed in a flash. The treatment was done. Bryke then told them not to worry about him. Rosalia thought back to the book, how she had been left behind in the sea of flames by them, and the anguish she had felt in that moment. I said it once, you are not allowed. So you cannot choose to give up your life. In order to prevent his daughter from meeting the Grand Oracle, the man had made many precautionary arrangements, but he had failed to account for his daughter's appeal. She had been taken away by the boy, and the two of them met by accident in the end. Given the urgency, I have no choice but to temporarily set aside my agreement with Duke Valencia. With that, he placed his hand on Bryke's wound. As a flash of sacred light bloomed, Bryke's injuries were healed. Rosalia was amazed by this miraculous form of healing. Looking at Yog with his long, flowing hair, Rosalia felt a strange, inexplicable sense of familiarity. Just as Yog was about to reply to her, Duke Valencia arrived. Who taught you such an outdated way to make a proposal? Hearing his voice, Rosalia's face flooded with relief. She ran to him at once. The man dropped to one knee and immediately checked his daughter for any sign of injury. He noticed the wrinkle in Rosalia's sleeve. When he pulled it back, he found a bruised bite mark on her arm. This doesn't look like it came from a wild animal. It's human. Duke Valencia's expression darkened. He looked at Bryke, who was avoiding his eyes. It's all right, father. I was the one who asked him to bite me. At that moment, Yog stepped up behind Rosalia and offered to treat her. Duke Valencia stopped him. After all, the man knew the boy before him was far from harmless, whatever his appearance suggested. I will not allow anyone else to touch my daughter. But when he heard Yog say that without prompt treatment, Rosalia's arm would scar, the man was silent for a long moment, and in the end he slowly lowered the hand he had held between his daughter and Yog. As a golden light shimmered around her, Rosalia's wound slowly healed. That familiar sensation washed over her again. The girl couldn't help thinking of the dream in which she had once been healed this same way. Yog, for his part, was staring directly at Rosalia. The intensity of his gaze made her flush and look away. "Were you asking earlier if we've met somewhere before? Is it that you've seen someone who looks like me?" The unexpected question left her unsure how to answer. Not wanting to reveal the secret of the library, Rosalia immediately denied having said anything. Yog clearly knew she wasn't being truthful, but with Duke Valencia standing right there, he had no choice but to turn back toward the unconscious bear nearby. He treated its injuries, then returned its cub to it. Yog then approached Edmund. "I hope that in future hunts you will exercise some restraint and refrain from harming animals that are not your intended prey. If it appeared before me, doesn't that make it prey?" The guileless reply left Yog with nothing to say. Before long, the group made their way back to camp. Duke Lampez, having received word, also arrived. Rosalia had assumed he was there to collect the runaway Breike, but before she could say a word, Duke Lampez had already rushed to stand before them and delivered a sharp slap across Breike's cheek. "You dared to take the daughter of Duke Valencia as a hostage? Is this what we raised you to be? Apologize to Duke Valencia at once?" Rosalia had not expected any of this. Breike had anticipated exactly this from his father. He stepped forward and offered his apology to Duke Valencia. But the man had no intention of letting the matter rest. Rosalia was about to plead on Breike's behalf when an attendant nearby interrupted their exchange. After a brief whispered word, Duke Valencia let the matter go for the time being. He hurried to take Rosalia home. Seeing the troubled look on her father's face, Rosalia feared something had happened to Urian. But this time it was not him, Duke Valencia told her in a quiet, cold voice. Lorenzo had disappeared, a boy cursed from birth, but ever since the girl was taken in by his uncle, her presence had brought him an unexpected peace. A resolve had already taken shape in his heart. "Whatever Rosalia wanted, whatever it is, I will make it happen." Hearing the steadiness in Urian's voice, Lorenzo had no grounds to argue. He asked whether Urian had thought of Rosalia when his condition flared. "Yes, and it was when I was still lucid." When it came to Rosalia, Urian's feelings were deeply conflicted. Her presence brought him a profound calm, and she had a way of showing him her truest self without warning. And yet there was something he could not suppress, an overwhelming compulsion. He didn't know how to define what it was. Lorenzo wasn't surprised. He had long suspected Rosalia was the saintess. And there was the other side of it. When the curse consumed Urian, part of him desperately craved the purification the saintess alone could bring, while another part, equally driven, wanted to destroy her. There may not be words in any language to describe such a contradiction. Lorenzo, at a loss to explain it, could only say, "When you become an adult, you will be able to see through the feeling that is deceiving you. By then, you will know what to call it." With that, he sent Urian to rest. He returned to his study and looked at the machine core Rosalia had brought back. Perhaps having guessed at some truth, Lorenzo left the estate at once to find the two who were still at the hunting festival. But midway there, the unexpected occurred. "Pleasure. My name is Cordelia. I have come to reclaim what was taken from me." Seeing Cordelia, the image of Rosalia, only confirmed what Lorenzo had already suspected, and Cordelia had already guessed that the man before her knew the truth. She suggested she could take Rosalia's place, become his niece instead. Lorenzo refused outright. As far as he was concerned, he had only one niece, Rosalia. To keep anyone from disrupting her plan, Cordelia spoke in a calm, chilling voice. "I wish you a pleasant journey." A gate to another dimension slowly opened. Lorenzo knew there was no escaping this. He regretted that Rosalia had never once called him uncle. Before he could say a word, the gate had already closed. The machine core that had fallen to the ground was picked up by Cordelia. In the silent forest, only Lorenzo's horse remained. Back home, Duke Valencia searched but found nothing of use. He discovered only that the machine core Rosalia had brought back was also gone along with Lorenzo. It appeared Lorenzo's research had already been completed, but the fact that it had all gone so smoothly was itself unsettling. Days passed. Rosalia had been worrying about the missing Lorenzo the whole time. To comfort her, Emma told Rosalia that if she placed her fallen tooth under her pillow and whispered a spell, the tooth would grant her wish. Rosalia saw through the childish story in an instant. "Have I ever lied to you?" "No." "Then put the tooth under your pillow and try whispering the spell. The words are, Sara Kadula Mejikabura Bibithi Babithithibu." Rosalia was at a loss, her expression full of resistance. But when deep night finally fell, And all was still. Rosalia sat up in bed. She placed the tooth beneath her pillow. Sarakadula mejikabura bibiti babitithibu. Having uttered that ridiculous incantation, Rosalia's face went red. She lowered her head. The grief she could no longer hide. And finally, she said the words Lorenzo had always waited to hear. Please bring Uncle Lorenzo back to me. Every time I lose a tooth, I'll give it to you, so please, bring my uncle back.